Okay, call this meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the May 16th meeting of council. The city of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. I'm really pleased to proclaim May 15th to the 21st as National Public Works Week in the city of Parksville. Our staff are dedicated to creating and maintaining the city's infrastructure and to help keep our community strong by providing many public works services for the past 2 years. City staff have successfully navigated their vital roles through the pandemic, sustaining daily operations which enhance the quality of life and safety of Parksville residents and make our city a better place to live. To celebrate, the city will host a Public Works open house on Wednesday, May the 18th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the Parksville Community Park. Activities will interest residents of all ages with demonstrations, displays, activities for children, and of course, a chance to explore and ask questions of our staff. We are proud to highlight the city services provided by Public Works and hope this open house will increase awareness of the work necessary to maintain city infrastructure and services. On with the meeting. So the consent agenda, I've got 3 items on the consent agenda: minutes of the council meeting held May the 2nd, minutes of the special council meeting held May the 9th, and approval of the agenda, tonight's agenda. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Greer. Any discussions, additions, changes? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carry. Thank you. Presentations. We have a presentation by MNP, the 2021 audited financial statements. Sir, Corey, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to go there. So thank you for inviting me here to speak today. I have a short presentation and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. We'll be talking about the city's 2021 financial statements and the audit process. So my name is Corey Vanderhorst. I'm with the audit firm of MNP. There we go. So we'll start by looking at some of the financial statement highlights for 2021 and then talk a little bit about the audit. Diving right in, starting with the statement of financial position or the balance sheet at December 31st, 2021. So you can see that the city has cash and investments of just over $68.9 million at the end of 2021. When we add in receivables and some other liquid assets, we get a total financial asset number of $73.3 million, up about $10 million from the prior year. Debt being paid down on schedule is $5.4 million at the end of the year. And when you add in accounts payable and other liabilities, total liabilities at the city are $32.5 million at the end of the year. You can see an increase there from the 26.8 in the prior year. A significant amount of that is funds available for future projects. So there was some what we call deferred revenue rolling over into 2022. That's a large part of that increase in the total liability number. If you subtract the total liabilities from total financial assets, you get what we call the net financial asset position. So that's a kind of like a liquid position of $40.8 million at the end of the year. And then the big number there, the tangible capital assets, roads, water, sewer, infrastructure, all the stuff that you can touch, and infrastructure assets are $198.5 million at the end of 2021. So the final number on the slide is accumulated surplus at $239.5 million, and I will explain what's in that number in a future slide. Moving then to the income statement, or what we call the statement of operations now. So this is a statement that shows you the activities throughout 2021. You can see total revenues of $32.8 million, up from the 31.4, but a little bit below budget, as is common with the last few years under the pandemic. There's a few projects and things and grant funding that didn't come through as expected as projects get delayed for various reasons. On the expenses side, $26.6 million, an increase from 2020. However, again, bearing in mind that 2020 has the impact of the first part of the pandemic where there was reduced activities and recreation and other things. The expenses are still under budget, where budget expenses were 30.8 versus the actuals of 26.6. On an accounting basis, there's an annual surplus at the city of $6.1 million, very consistent with the prior year 6.2. Now I say accounting basis because we put a lot of adjustments in there for deferred revenues and other things. I like to look at the statement of cash flows because this is more in line with how you're thinking when you're looking at budget, what's actually coming into the bank accounts throughout the year. So city operations in 2021 brought in $15 million, very consistent with the prior year. $5.5 million spent on capital projects, a net $7.6 million transferred into investments to make sure you're earning a good rate of return on any of those funds being rolled forward. Debt being paid down on schedule of $262,000 for a net cash inflow in the main bank accounts of $1.5 million. I promised I would explain what's in that accumulated surplus number of 239 million. You can see the third line down, the biggest number by far is what we call the equity in the tangible capital assets. So that's the book value of those assets minus the debt, and that's 192 million. Then there's $17.7 million put aside in restricted reserves and surplus, and an unrestricted surplus balance of $28.6 million at the end of the year. Shifting gears a little bit into the audit and some of the audit process, we are happy to be providing what we call an unmodified opinion for the city. So that is auditors speak for a clean audit opinion. We are satisfied that the financial statements prepared by city staff are prepared accurately in accordance with the correct accounting framework for local governments. We're ready to sign the report. The last piece of the audit is council approval here tonight. When we're doing our audit, we do several things throughout the course of the audit. Firstly, we'll look at the controls in place at the city, make sure that we're comfortable you're getting accurate financial reporting. And then we sample transactions throughout the year to form our audit opinion. We don't look at every transaction. There is always the possibility of things we don't look at slipping through, but we give ourselves, we do enough work to get ourselves comfort around our opinion. I'd like to formally acknowledge the excellent cooperation and assistance from staff in the finance department specifically, but throughout the city, because we do bug people in some of the other departments as well. I will confirm that MMP is independent with respect to the city of Parksville. So we didn't do any other projects or any other work that would impair our ability to give you an independent audit opinion. And that covers from January 1st, 2021, all the way through to today. That's the full audit period. I'll wrap up by going back into the numbers. So I started by looking just at 2021 and that 1 year in isolation. We like to look at a 3 to 5 year time window of the past few years to look at trends and see if there's anything trending in the finances at the city that would cause concern for councilors or things to think about as you're looking forward and budgeting and making your plans. So we start by looking at what we call a sustainability ratio. And this is a rough measure of liquidity. Here we're looking for this magic number of 1. If the ratio is over 1, it means you have funds available for the future and you can pay for future projects. If it dips below 1, you are taxing or raising fees to pay for the past. So the good news for the city here is it is above 1, is well above 1, is 2.26 for 2021. It has fluctuated a little bit over the last few years. You can see there on the slide from 2.25 to 2.37 and then back down to 2.26. But still healthy and over that magic number of 1. And the last ratio that we look at, we call it a flexibility ratio. And we're looking here at the infrastructure and the age of the assets. The reason we call it flexibility is if the assets are getting really old, you don't have a lot of flexibility around what you're using your funds for because you're going to be doing a lot of infrastructure maintenance. So we look at the aging of the assets, a rough measure of how depreciated they are, and compare that to the original cost. For the city, that value is 71.4. It did decline from 74% in 2019, reflecting some of the aging, but we know there are a significant amount of capital projects that were going late in 2021 and rolling into 2022. So I'd expect to see that this ratio either holds for 2022 or potentially increases because of some of those significant capital projects. So thank you for taking the time to listen to an accountant for 10 minutes or so. I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the report. My thought on this report is that it is an excellent one. The city is in excellent condition. And in your knowledge, how do we rate among other towns our size? I have the feeling that we're at the very top when it comes to finances.
Thank you, Councillor. A great question. I think those two ratios that we just looked at are good indicators. Where, you know, the slide where I talked about that magic number of 1, you're actually over 2, which means funds available for the future. And that's fairly strong compared to some of your neighbors. A lot of your neighbors are in the low 1 point something.
Mhm.
The other one is that capital asset ratio. That capital asset ratio in the 70% is also strong. The communities that I work with up and down the island generally tend to be anywhere between 52 or 53% and 75. So you're kind of trending towards the high end of that ratio as well.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just at this time, I wanted to thank Corey and that because it's the first time that we've had in-person financial and accounting, and just to thank staff again. It was, I'm part of the audit committee as well, so it reminded me of a few things that I had put back into the gray areas of my brain and everything in regards to DCCs and development permits and everything. So I greatly appreciate you bringing that forward in some of our conversation this afternoon as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, through your worship to Corey. Corey, could you explain just from a standpoint for the audience and for the audience at home on the unrestricted surpluses and the restricted surplus or the surplus we're holding? By the looks of things, we have about 43 million, somewhere in that area for a full surplus. And the 28 million is not allocated to anything. That means we're in fairly good shape, correct?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll start by answering, and then I would, of course, defer to staff to give them a chance to answer that. Yes, you've identified those two line items at about 43 million there. They're important. They're just under half of it allocated for future projects, tied up, right, either through reserves or council motions or other bylaws that would restrict the ability to use it. And then the other amounts or the unallocated surplus may be earmarked, but not by a council motion or a bylaw or anything that restricts its use. So staff may have it in various funds or allocated for projects, but when we report out on the financial statements, if it doesn't have the formality of a council motion or a bylaw behind it, it shows up as that what we would call unallocated surplus. Yeah.
Any other? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Especially this is your first time around with us, isn't it?
It was, yes, first time with the city, and a big thank you to staff for all the help with the audit this year.
Yeah, and we thank you. Appreciate it. I need a mover and a seconder for the two recommendations on the agenda. Moved by Councillor Patterson, second by Councillor Greer. Discussion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We have a delegation today. Mr. Gray, would you like to join us? There you are.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for the opportunity to introduce this project to you tonight. You may be familiar with the site because we did rezone this, so I think about 5 years ago, and an OCP amendment occurred in 2013, I believe, for the same property. The property in question is 285 Despard Avenue. This is the corner of the original Despard development site. And our approach now has changed due to some of the adjacency and some of the development that's happening in and around the area. The big factor being that QF went ahead with their grocery store. So that's kind of been a key piece to this puzzle we're developing. The intent of this bylaw amendment is to add in uses. So we're not taking away what's embedded with the neighborhood commercial zoning in place now, but we are looking to create a more of a mixed use concept and adding some residential to that piece as well, building on the mixed use corner. So you can see the site here. It is vacant at the moment. Off-site services have been put in, including sidewalks, roadways, and parking along both Despard and Alberni. You can see the two Seymour Pacific developments that have occurred since we originally rezoned the Despard site for Insight. Across the street, we have the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Project, obviously QF, which is in place now. Sorry, this is the best air photo I could get. And the district group's development on Molliet is well and on its way as well. So there is a real kind of cohesion and nodal community happening here that we want to embrace and move forward with. So you can see here, this is current zoning. So you can see these are all multi-unit residential developments and a commercial core component with the QF piece. Obviously the A1 portion across the street remains a great mystery for all of us, but we'll see what happens one day. As I alluded to, it is currently zoned neighborhood commercial. That is the OCP land use designation, and that is a designation that Insight sought through the OCP process. And you can see these are the OCP land uses, so they aren't written out, but 3 is the multi-unit residential, and you can see all of those sites have been picked up and are being developed at the moment. So there is clearly a need and demand within the community, and 11 is comprehensive development for QF. So I won't read through all of this. We have the same conversation every time I come here. What we're showing you now that was done by DHK Architects in Nanaimo was a proof of concept. It shows what we can fit on the site and that we can actually fit it there and quantify infrastructure needs for that type of development. So as you all know, this will come back at a later time should it proceed for a development permit with specific design and technical detailing. So this is just a quick concept that our architects came up with, and it embraces the notion of the corner and that this is a gateway site. This concept shows 3 separate buildings with ground floor commercial and 3 stories of residential above. The architects also provided us with 3 vignettes so you could kind of visualize what would happen at the corner. Because this is a key corner in the city and a key gateway, we did take it up a level and did some visualizations of what buildings could look like there and what would be important for that corner. Oh, sorry, so go back. So the first visualization is from the corner looking into the site. The second is coming back up Despard from walking height. And the third is looking at the underground parking. So essentially this entire piece is 1 level of underground parking beneath the buildings and this surface parking piece. So when we were talking to the architects, we were really concerned about making this a gateway, having this kind of be a architectural statement and embracing the notion of having a corner plaza, a civic plaza that kind of mimics what they've done on the flanking corner. It's just a kind of a nice picture of what it could look like. This is looking up Despard, and as you can see, we do expect this will be a busy neighborhood, so there'll be quite a bit of pedestrian foot traffic with all the developments going on, and there'll be a lot of people living here on site, which is so important for the commercial viability piece as well. And this is just looking from Alberni at the site from the corner of the property, and you can see, so this is a continuous underground parkade beneath essentially the entire property. So as I alluded to, the only additional use we're asking for now is a multifamily residential. So this would occur with the same density targets as are on the adjacent properties, which is 125 units per hectare. Based on the site area, we can achieve 147 units on this site. As a part of our approach, what we're looking at is securing some conditions to that residential development. The first being a rental housing component. The second being embracing the BC Energy Step Code. And the third, having a minimum commercial floor area. So we're not giving up that commercial component on a key gateway intersection. So in terms of securing rental housing, the property owners are looking at locking in through covenant or another legal means a 20-year term on rental housing. So that housing could not be converted to strata and sold beyond that time. The other piece is the BC Energy Step Code. This is coming anyway through code. So in this case, it's a voluntary step 3 of the Energy Step Code. And the third piece is restricting the number of residential units until that commercial component is developed at the site. So that's a 500 square meter commercial floor space component that must go ahead before we can go over 90 residential units on the property. Excuse me. So there were some offsite considerations. We went back, had our transportation engineers look at what the effect would be if we added residential. They came up with 2 recommendations. The first of which is adding in a left turn lane at Grieg and Despard. That's actually a pretty easy fix because the intersection is wide enough to just develop the left lane. And the second piece is providing sidewalk connections to all 3 of the proposed buildings. Now, that seems pretty pedestrian, but I'm going to talk about that in a moment with some of the parking issues that have developed around the area. Just noting that sidewalk connection and access to adjacent streets should be coming in as a technical requirement through development permit area guidelines. So the small elephant in the room is there was a lot of issues with parking on Despard Avenue as the site was developing out, and it was a nightmare for Insight trying to develop out the subdivision portion of this site as well. These are challenges that are not unique to Parksville. These are things that we're running into in all the jurisdictions we bring multifamily projects forward that are rental, and there's a secondary charge for parking. So what you're finding is people will get 1 unit with their apartment, and then they'll have to pay an extra $50 or some fee to achieve the second parking space. And so they're choosing to park in the road instead. It's a global issue. I'm not sure what mechanism could be put in place, but we would certainly embrace any mechanism that would control that or stop that from happening. The intent is that parking is handled on site, and I believe your parking standards are sufficient to meet that need. Another piece on Dunbar, which we're not going to find on the corner site we're talking about right now, is the rollover curb standard. The problem with rollover curb standard is people just drive all over the place on the boulevards, where have you. And so the notion of having a rollover curb in a single family residential subdivision makes sense because you can put the driveways anywhere you want, right? But to have a barrier curb would kind of prevent some of these cars that are parked up on the sidewalk and blocking the sidewalks and that kind of thing. The other thing I noticed, I went out how to walk around the site, is no one parks on Despard. And the clear reason from a design standpoint is there's no access from Despard to any of these sites. So without a direct walking path, I'm a sheep, we're all sheep. I don't want to walk around the block to get into my unit. So there are some easy fixes like timed enforcement that could be put on Dunbar to fix some of these issues. I should say with our project, it's a bit different because there's a mixed use component in that all of that parking for the commercial uses can be gobbled up at night by residential users as well. So there's an added bonus to doing the mixed use approach. The other community benefit, which was really important to me and Insight, is to kind of embrace what they've done at the QF site. They've got a small public plaza. It's not really occupied that much right now, but I think you see as the neighborhood develops, it will be. So we're looking at providing a statutory right of way of about 4,000 square feet, which would allow for a flanking gateway plaza on the other side as well. And I've just kind of highlighted what kind of spatial area that would be right there. The typical financial amenity contribution, similar to what we did on the original rezoning, I believe it was about $500,000 contribution on that one. It'll be $1,000 per unit. We don't presuppose council's decision-making on where this money will be allocated, but we have some ideas. And so those ideas are, this could be attributed to developing that corner plaza as a public space. Part of that is earmarked for the left turn function at Despard and Craig Street as well. And as I alluded to, the cost of that is quite low just because it's a repaint. It's not expanding the intersection or anything like that. Did I go over 10 minutes? I'll leave it open to questions. Thank you.
I was watching. Just love to give it a click. All right. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Gray, for your presentation. Very informative as usual. I have a couple questions and points while you're here and you're able to converse while we're here. I find it a bit easier than trying to guess what you're thinking after when you're not allowed to speak. So this is, I just think that this is appropriate. My first question is regarding the lack of commercial space. When we initially zoned this one and the OCP as well, it referred to it as a commercial node. And it was with the understanding that there's going to be considerable housing, various forms of housing, so rentals and housing itself. And so this was looked at as a rather strong feature for the neighborhood concept, with the idea by having a commercial node in such heavy densified homes and so forth, to prevent or allow people to shop, walk where they shop in their neighborhood type of thing. I'm concerned that this is going to lessen somewhat I know that there's still a commercial component, but it seems to be lessened down with the amount of space and so forth allocated for it, which may prohibit or not prohibit, but not be in favor to say a larger commercial store or a retail outlet of some sort that may locate there. And I'm not pleased about that, because I was really hoping that now that is all proven, now the residential has grown up around the area, which you pointed out very clearly. I'm sad that we could be losing that commercial, because I remember when we talked about it right at the beginning with Insight, we talked about the possibilities of there could be a brew pub in there, that caught everybody's eye. So the thing is that type of thing, but then we're not talking box stores here, but we're talking about the junior box stores, or the smaller stores, to preclude the public from having to go to Nanaimo or Courtney for their shopping in a larger store. So I'm sad that may actually eliminate that type of commercial. Do you have a comment on that first one?
Sure, through your worship to the councillor. So we are very conscious of that. 5,000 square feet doesn't seem like a lot, but we're still keeping the conditions of the neighborhood commercial zone, in that these are intended to be smaller commercial units. The issue is that QF kind of stole our thunder on the commercial, to be perfectly honest. So any of those large retail spaces that we talked about last time that are lacking from our current commercial inventory have occurred over there. So I think we feel like 5,000 is a functional number, and that having it as a condition of getting the max density is an incentive to the developer of the property. And when you're doing these mixed use sites, it's really hard because there's a residential and a commercial component. So the stratas can be really uncomfortable.
Right.
So that's where we are now. The intent is to keep this as a neighborhood commercial node, and the unit sizes are smaller, and that's restricted from the zoning currently. So it still has that function, but it's going to be something else too, hopefully.
Thank you. As a follow-up, if I may, Your Worship. Thank you. I note that there's a difference in the, by one stroke of the pen, if this is approved by council anyways, it's going to change the value of the property. No question. And that it's been pointed out anyways in the background report. I don't know if the public has this as well, but we have in the background report anyways. The assessed land value would go from, well, the assessed value of 1.6, and then the estimated value would be 4.4 million. The appraiser estimates that the rezone value of the property as proposed is estimated to have a value of approximately 6.223 million as compared to 4.445 million, which is an increase of the land value of 1.778 million, which is substantial. So I have two concerns. And one, I understand now that this is what's commonly spoken of as uplift. An uplift to the property, just nothing that the developer has done on it other than seeking a zoning change. In other jurisdictions and so forth, I've asked what happens to that uplift, and sometimes the uplift is provided back to the city or the municipality, because it's just the value of having a change in zoning. So is that something that the developer would be prepared to do, is consider contributing the uplift value back to the city of Parksville?
That's an interesting question. I would encourage the city to develop a policy on that, a specific policy. Negotiated amenities are really interesting sometimes. I think this is a typical contribution. The last time we came in, it was $800 a door. This time it's 1,000. The notion of giving the entire uplift, I've never seen that done in any jurisdiction. I know that Qualcomm's bringing in a policy to ask for 50, which in my professional opinion is going to preclude development in that town. Nanaimo's kind of moving to a different number as well. This is a number we're comfortable with now, but this is why we have the opportunity to speak at this time. Yeah, it's not the gift from the community is the uplift. And I think Insight has always recognized that and is willing to contribute a bit of that back, but the development game should result in a profit for the developer as well. So where that number lands, it's all over the map in every jurisdiction. So this is what we're proposing right now, but if we need to have a further conversation about it, we can.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I don't suggest that maybe the entire uplift is, but maybe a portion of it type of thing could be contributed back to the city.
Yes, that's the intent
Yeah.
of the financial.
Thank you. And as a follow-up further, and then what guarantee do we have that upon getting the successful rezoning that the applicant, your developer, does not turn around and flip the property? Because sometimes the development does not go forward for whatever reasons and different reasons. What guarantee do we have that this didn't get a zoning amendment and was uplifted in value and then it gets flipped to someone else?
Sure, through the mayor. That happens all the time.
I know.
And that's part of the development game. And there are lots that I brought forward to you that I wish I'd gone ahead and didn't, to be frank. But yeah, that's just part of this, right? So Insight is a developer of land. So they create the land uses and then they sell it to a developer who develops the property typically. That's not the case with all of Insight's properties. There are some in Nanaimo that we develop through Insight for them. But this is what they do. They build communities. They create the land use opportunities so that when we are in a big boom like we are now, people can come in, land, and create the rental housing opportunities that we're looking for. So no, there is no guarantee it won't be flipped.
Okay, thank you. And one more follow-up, if I may, Your Worship.
Quickly, yep.
Thank you. And then the other portion is just a comment about you're talking about the public space right on the corner of Despard and Alberni Highway. Yeah, I understand the desire to create more public art and so forth. Recently, I just attended a session in the city of Victoria anyways, it was placemaking. And we're talking about what works in public squares, where public, this is like a public art feature and so forth. And the exact location where you're locating, and I'm just sorry to say that they say, don't ever do this. Only for the fact that not a lot of people will be attracted to a square, just to be brief here, that is sitting looking at two major arterials, Despard, and it's not comfortable, it's not relaxing. You may have a fantastic piece of art there, but nobody's going to appreciate it because behind them, it sounds like, well, freeway noise is not stress-free. So all I'm suggesting that I know that we were calling it a gateway at one time, and maybe this would help it, but the people that are going to only appreciate the art are already ripping by at too fast a speed anyway. Just my own personal opinion. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I guess Councillor O'Brien asked the questions I was thinking about, and also that placemaking. We were on that tour. If through you to Nigel, I guess my biggest concern is the traffic. And if you're going to add housing, I'm not sure. I would think that housing would add more traffic than just commercial, I would assume. But there is, and then the corner at Craig and Despard, I'm not sure how that's going to work, why you feel a left-hand turn there will work better. Maybe you can explain that.
Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson. Hi. I'm not a professional transportation engineer, so we count on their expertise to tell us what's needed. I think the city jumped ahead and fixed some of the problems in this area right away because there was a serious accident in the past. But based on the opinions of our professional transportation engineers, the existing infrastructure can handle the additional load. And the one item that was brought up by them as mission critical was to create a left turn lane at Despard and Craig. There is a detailed traffic impact analysis if you want to take a close look at it. But once again, I'm not a traffic engineer, but we can have one here next time if that's needed.
Thank you. And could I have a follow-up, please?
Certainly.
So the issue came up, and it's a common issue, as you say, that developers might flip the land once they get the OCP amendments. So that's why I'm always a little reluctant to amend OCPs. But there possibly could be that we could put some sort of restrictive, I guess it wouldn't be called a restrictive covenant, but some sort of rule that would say that the property cannot be sold once the OCP amendment goes through, if in fact it does go through. or that that developer has to, you know, maintain that property for so many years. I'm just thinking of ways that to prevent that flipping. So that's just my comment. I think Councillor O'Brien made all the points that I was thinking about. So thank you.
I'll let you take it. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to our delegation. You mentioned the 20-year rental. Can you expand on that?
So residential units could only be used for rental purposes for a term of 20 years. That's the term we're coming in with. If we need to have a conversation about that as well, that's all on the table. And as Councillor O'Brien alluded to, this is our one time to have a chat before we start coming into the formal process. I actually do believe we get another introductory meeting on it because it is an OCP amendment. So there is another opportunity for us to have a talk.
Follow up, Your Worship.
Please.
Thank you. We have a report just a little later in this agenda as well. Opportunity for public engagement and some feedback from the public. When do you foresee that happening if this is advanced?
Through the mayor, as if you give us a green light today, I'll start planning it tomorrow.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Worship, through to the delegation. I just wanted to ask the question in regards to affordable housing components within your facility. With the Despard previous operation there, they had, I think, 15 units per tower that they had. Is there anything planned on that side? And just because I'm not aware of that, so I just wanted to ask the question.
Sure, through the mayor to the councillor. That was undertaken by Seymour Pacific, so I don't know the specifics of what they did, but I believe that was a density bonusing scenario that they took up and ran with. We have had conversations with staff on this project, and we have been talking for quite a while on this application. It's gone through a number of iterations, and staff did say, you know, we're willing to build in a density bonusing structure for affordable housing if you want. Anything above and beyond what we're looking at right now, the initial ask, we're absolutely more than willing to see a density bonusing structure for that to go ahead.
Thank you. A couple points that I'd like to make here. First off, I'm going to be looking for affordable housing before I even consider going on side with the development. It's very important to the city that we have more affordable housing than what we already have. So I'll be looking for that. Just a hint on in the future. As far as flipping goes, it doesn't matter who owns the property. The zoning and the OCP are what dictate what happens on that piece of property. And I mean, we can't tell who's going to own a piece of property 6 years from now, or 1 year from now, or 6 weeks from now. It changes, but where we have the control is through zoning, through the OCP, and through development permits. And it doesn't, regardless of what they do. And in the same thing with the idea of, you know, the uplift on the property. Yeah, the developers do make an uplift on it. They're the ones that took the chance and put their money on the table to buy the piece of property and moved it forward. But they're also, in your case, you're offering an amount, which I happen to think it's not quite enough. We'll go back to the table on that in the future for contribution. Amenity contributions. I think that's where we get the upside to the uplift on this is in the increase in amenity contributions. So other than that, I'm waiting to see all the rest of the information before I make any final decisions. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your contribution. Any other questions before I? Thank you. Thank you very much. And for our second good evening. Welcome back.
Hi, I'm not Brianna. I'm Brandon Crema, one of the partners at District Group, and with me is Brianna. And Brianna's going to give you a presentation on our Grieg Road proposal here in 1 second. But before we started, I just wanted to give a quick update on our other project on Despard and Mullett. Just to give everybody a quick overview of what's happening there. So about a month and a bit ago, we started a pre-leasing campaign on our first 2 buildings, which we have a development permit in place for. We had a bit of a rough start. It was a bit of a false start. We hired a property management company that did some of their own research. And we came out to market with a couple of buildings, one being limited to age and demographic and the other not. We since have gone back to our leasing partner and we've rectified that. So both buildings are open for all demographics. Leasing has gone a little bit further. We have 122 suites to be leased. 25% of those are leased. That's around 30 units. And we're hoping to get occupancy in June or July of this year. We're also, we've just finished a design panel with staff and the design panel advisors, and we'll be back in for a development permit for our second 2 buildings, which we hope to get started on here in the next several months. So that's the update for our Mullett and Despard project. And I just wanted to let everyone know that's how we're making out. So thank you. I'll let Brianna give you the update on Grieg Road.
Thanks, Brandon. Hello, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Brianna Mussatto, and I am the development manager at District. First, I wanted to start with a recap. So I last presented to you back in July 19th in 2021. Since then, we have hosted 2 extensive rounds of public consultation, both in person and virtually. We had multiple meetings with city staff. We've had meetings with special interest groups, and we've completed detailed technical reports and studies, including civil infrastructure reports, water modeling, sewer modeling, transportation traffic impact assessments, river and floodplain reports, environmental habitat reports, and geotechnical reports. As a reminder where our site is located, it is 140 acres along Grieg Road, located at 1465 Grieg Road, with Englishman River to the west and south, industrial lands to the east, and RDN lands to the north and west. The site is currently designated in the OCP as planned neighborhood, which allows for a mix of different building types and uses, and it's also designated single unit residential. We are seeking an OCP amendment to rezone it to a comprehensive development zone, as well as comply with the planned neighborhood designation on the site. Overall, our project rationale is, of the 140 acres, there's roughly half of it that would be developed. The other half would be preserved for environmental features. There would be 800 units on the site we're proposing. It would be in multiple phases, built out over 10 to 15 years. We hosted a virtual public consultation period last year during COVID between August 2nd to September 30th, so over 2 months last year. We had substantial advertising of the consultation, including mail-out notices beyond the city's recommended 10-meter radius. We sent it to 616 households in Parksville and the regional district, all of the neighbors around our site. We also had newspaper ads and on-site signage targeting neighbors and users of the land. The project survey was available online for 2 months at riversideparksville.ca, and we received over 1,000 responses to the online survey, 1,003 responses. Of those responses, 46% of the respondents were aligned with district's objectives, while 19% were neutral and 35% were opposed. Many respondents identified their concern with Parksville's lack of available housing and the low vacancy rate. But common concerns also included the floodplain concerns, wildlife and wetland conservation, and increased traffic and the insufficient infrastructure, the perception of insufficient infrastructure. There's also strong feelings that more housing is required to retain and attract young people to support the long-term economy. From the comments that we received in the survey, we created this climate resilient plan. In here, we have a natural park in the northwest section, which would preserve a lot of the ecological areas of the site. And then we also have a trail network that would connect from Rathtrevor Beach Park to Topbridge Community Park. We have greenway corridors, and then we would develop in different housing clusters, which would be integrated with landscape. And we want to protect some of the natural features, including significant trees and wetlands. So we provided that plan to the public at a public open house we hosted on April 6th. During that public open house, we also sent it out to 616 mailing addresses, newspaper ads to the Qualicum Beach News on March 23rd and March 30th. During the open house, we had 120 attendees. And for those that weren't able to attend, we also had the boards available online following the event for 2 weeks at riversideparksville.ca. Of those comments, we received 40, which have all been provided to the city on April 25th. 19 respondents were opposed to the application, 16 asked general questions and comments, and 5 were supportive of the application. I won't get into all of the comments. They have been provided to you in your packages, but here are some of the key concerns and issues that were brought up multiple times, and here's how we're proposing to address them. The first is the floodplain protection. So we're proposing to stay above the 500-year floodplain level, and we'd be securing that through a no-build covenant that would be brought to you at a later council date. We would also provide a minimum of a 30-meter setback from the 5-year floodplain level of the Englishman River. Secondly, people would like a variety of housing, was a comment that came up. The CD zone would outline a minimum and maximum amount, which would be brought forward at a later council date. And a housing covenant would be provided to secure the first 100 units as rental housing. Third was parkland and green open space. So we would be providing 27 hectares, which is 67 acres of protected green space, conservation area, or parkland. And that would be secured through an agreement presented at another council meeting in the future. We would also maintain trail connections from Rathtrevor Beach Park to Topbridge Community Park. And we would bond for traffic and infrastructure upgrades, including a new signalized eastbound left turn lane at Highway 19A and Tuan Road. And we would construct an extension of Tuan Road to the property. Additionally, we would be protecting the wetlands on the property, especially as required as BC's riparian area regulation. And then lastly, city contribution. So our proposal is a voluntary monetary contribution of $1,600 per unit, which would equate to, with 800 units, $1.28 million. So thank you all very much for your time, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. Looking for anybody with any questions. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Mussatto. Just a quick comment. I recognize this evening, what's later on the agenda and so forth is a very small, tiny step in just moving forward along with this project. And I know what's expected. And it's more than anything, recognizing and receiving your input from your different public meetings that you've had, which is very appreciative and is very thorough. And I do appreciate that. Had a hard time getting through a lot of it, but yeah, I got there. And so the question is that on your second to last slide there, you had responses, like it was like key concerns and then responses. Are those responses and those key concerns, is that what you have found from your public engagement?
Public engagement, through your worship, to Councillor Bryan, public engagement really varied. We had the full spectrum, from people saying, we love it, we need more housing, to people saying, leave it as is, do not touch it. So it depends on who you talk to. So the people that like walk their dogs on the site, they're concerned about having more trail connections. However, when we talk to environmental groups, the environmental groups would like to fence off a lot of the areas to protect them from dog walkers and people from disturbing the areas. So we're trying to find the right balance. This is our proposal of what we think would be a good balance, protecting some of the highly sensitive areas, and then having pockets of housing, having higher density so it's on a smaller footprint on the land, and having and protecting the wetlands while still having trail connections through especially the key points that the RDN was wanting through Truther Beach Park to Top Bridge Community Park.
Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a follow-up, and that explains, where you come through with some of those solutions. I guess what I'm concerned with is, like, you had a slide, and I tried counting it. I think it's number 4 or 5, which actually was it was actually a little green blob on a piece of paper, and it was kind of like saying, this is what's proposed here in this location here, and that was, and my eyesight isn't what it used to be, but at the same time, I think you missed probably an opportunity, and maybe to put maybe a draft plan out to the public as well as to council. Like, council has not, I double checked, we have not received any real draft plans, like suggesting, like, this is going to be parkland, this is going to be trail, this is going to be a floodplain, and this is going, we have not seen anything like that. And I realize that we're very early in the process, and that can be developed along as we go, and we have lots of opportunities to do that. But I believe, like, if we move along as we do tonight, it would be very helpful to council, and maybe on your website as well. If you put a draft plan out, I think it may have been a missed opportunity for you to actually present to the public what you said there. Is you put probably some of your solutions, that you're going to not be on the floodplain. You're considering all the nature amenities and so forth, but the public didn't get that. You know, it wasn't clear. We received many calls from the public saying they don't really know what's planned here. And so they're very afraid of the density. They're afraid of losing the park and so forth, and rightfully so. So I think you missed an opportunity. You engaged the public, but you really didn't give them enough that they could sink their teeth in to understand your concerns about protecting the nature park and for all the various groups that use that area. So that's just my comment anyways. And I know that can come. All that I'm saying is that I hope it comes pretty quick afterwards, because the thing is that the public are saying, we need more information. We need more information. And quite frankly, we need more information, because it's a huge project, and we want to get it right. And I think sooner rather than later would be great. But as I say, I understand that we're going to receive, or we may advance receiving your documentation that you found. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And to Brianna, through you to Brianna, if I could ask a question, or perhaps even just clarify the land that you're talking about saving, or the trees that you're talking about saving. There's a huge swath of evergreens. And you say you're going to keep so much for protected land, but it looks like the diagram that Councillor O'Brien was referring to basically looks like you've taken the trees down and you're reworking the green space. Is that so, or are you going to be able to save some of those original trees? And how many of them perhaps? What sort of area?
Through your worship to Councillor Wilson, thank you for the question. Of the half that won't be developed, that area, so of this approximately 140 acres, 70 acres would be developed. The other 70 would be able to be preserved, including the trees. And so we wouldn't be cutting down all the trees in the ecological nature park that we've done.
Could you, sorry to interrupt, if I could just ask the question, could you please go back to that and show us where those trees would be maintained?
Yes. Go back. Oh, there. Okay. So the dark green areas here, so all along the Englishman River, and then all along here.
So it looks like the center part, it looks like you've just done the perimeter, keeping the perimeter trees. Are you taking all those? Are you
and
taking
this
the trees?
large area here, as
Are-
well
are-
as, sorry. So
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, it looks like you've taken the trees out. If you go back, I think to the picture before, the photo before, yes, you can see how much natural forest there is there. But it looks like,
I'm approximating here, but I'm thinking it would be like this area and then this area to the river.
okay, so all of that up in the upper left, you would basically be maintaining in its natural state?
There would also be opportunities depending on the development permits on around the wetlands, retaining trees around the wetlands, as well as retaining trees where possible around the development. But there would need to be cutting trees in the pockets of development.
If I could, through your worship, to ask one more question about, I think Councillor O'Brien had a very valid point that we need more of a layout. We need to see where things are going, what you're taking down. And I think that's where you could answer a lot of these questions. There isn't enough information for me to really understand this clearly for such a major OCP amendment. So, but thanks for that, Brianna.
Councillor Chandler and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, through your worship to delegation, Brianna. Thanks for coming. Couple of questions. I think one of the biggest concerns is when we look at a project this size, we look at 800 units. It's a very scary number for people. They, immediately they're going to gravitate to the fact that there's going to be this desecration of trees and, the whole area is going to change and we're going to have all this population. But could you kind of detail and outline a little bit more for us as to the process behind this? I mean, first we're going to get these 100 rental units, let's say. That's say in year 1, right? Or year 2, possibly. And then we're looking down the road, we would be looking at, am I going to suggest maybe 100 units per year? Is that something that would be realistic or?
I would love to answer that
Yeah.
question for you. That's going to depend on the market and trades availability. There's a lot of factors there on how we can develop that. Ideally, we can develop through that quickly, but there's also permitting and development permits, building permits, and we'll see how much the market can absorb.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that as well. Through your worship to Brianna again. So with that being said, and I realize you can't really give us a number sort of thing, but in past experiences in similar markets, if you will, are we looking probably at 10 years for this whole project, right? At
Yes,
least?
I would say 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Okay, that's just a less scary number for people sometimes. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship, and to Brianna, delegation. On some of your slides and everything, and we have multiple pieces of paper and everything with comments and that, which I greatly appreciate. This property is very ecological in nature. On some of your slides, you showed that you had different environmental groups and everything that you met with. You didn't put any of their names in play. You also didn't put any of their comments or their suggestions. I don't necessarily see
So,
that, so.
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson, thank you. We met with the Aerosmith naturalists as well as the Mid-Island Vancouver Habitat Society. The Mid-Island Vancouver Habitat Society provided a letter which is included in the package. The other groups that we've met with, Aerosmith naturalists, we met with recently, and so we haven't been able to. They didn't provide formal written comments to our application, so I can provide that to you as well for our notes.
Follow up, your worship. You met with Nature's Trust as well?
We have.
Okay, and they haven't provided comments?
I personally haven't met with them. My colleague Brandon did.
Okay.
And I know that they are interested in having that connection along the Englishman River.
Okay, I'm just going to make a couple comments, and that many of my other fellow councillors have touched on things as well, because you're looking at 800 units over a 10 to 15 year plan. We just had a presentation just before you in regards with 147 units, and that would be built if advanced and everything within a 1 year time period. Just over a block away, you also have a development in play and 2 other proposed buildings in play. So we do know, obviously, that we're growing. And a lot of the perception that we get sometimes from the public is that we don't have enough water. We don't have enough for growth. And we may not have enough in transportation as well, with the Orange Bridge and getting in and out of this particular property. So those are just some of the things that I think, like Councillor O'Brien has said, it needs to be addressed and really needs to be brought forward to the community, and that as well, because a lot of people and that also feel that it should be a nature and left as such. But again, it's private property first and foremost, and that's trespassing technically. And that's, I have a grand puppy, we definitely walk a lot and everything. And I couldn't tell you if I inadvertently was somewhere that I shouldn't be, because we go to Top Ridge a great deal. So I'm very familiar with the area and so those are just some of my comments. I know that this is at this particular point in time, it seems very overwhelming, but in a 10 to 15 year plan and everything, and a bit at a time, is something that we could be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor France.
Thank you. Through the mayor to our delegation, Brianna. Appreciate you coming forward today to present to us. I know the public's been anticipating, really looking forward to seeing what's going on here. Obviously, by the amount of people that have been reaching out through the public engagements as well. Question I have is regarding the traffic concerns. I haven't heard too much about how you guys have responded to the public's concerns on the traffic. I do think and agree that 800 units would bring quite a substantial amount of traffic. So what is the plan for addressing that?
Through your worship to Councillor Fraz, thank you. So we have completed a traffic impact assessment. We've our team has reviewed hundreds of these, and this is very benign. Like I can provide you a copy. It's been sent to the city. There is some concern about like a couple intersections we are going to be improving, the intersection of Tuan Road and Resort Way. And whether our project proceeds or not, that intersection still needs to be improved. And so we'd be improving that intersection. Regarding Orange Bridge, talking to our transportation consultant, it sounds like it's a seasonal issue, that it happens primarily when there's a lot of tourists in the summer. Our traffic impact assessment was completed in the summer. And overall, we found that it was very minor issues. It was just the Tuan Road and the Island Highway and Resort Way intersection that needed to be upgraded.
You said you'll forward that traffic assessment to
Yes.
us?
I think
Thank
we
you.
have it in-house, do we not?
My other question is regarding the phased approach on there. Maybe you could speak to just how those phases are going to look like, how many phases, and how many units per phase. And as they're being developed, would you guys be open to having no build covenants on the other phases as it goes, so that we can see the progress? If things go well, it can open up to the next phase and so on, or wondering how you guys plan to proceed through those phases.
Through your worship, to Councillor Fraz, we are proposing, it would be in a number like 10 phases. I don't know the number. It's going to have to depend on the size of the project. We're proposing anywhere from duplexes to apartments. So if it was apartments, there would be more units in that one phase versus duplexes, which you could have 25 units or something. There's no, it will depend based off each phase. For no build covenants, we are proposing a number of no build covenants that will be presented primarily for the trails, the ecological parklands, floodplain. Those will be presented to council at hopefully a future council date. And each development permit would, the form and character would have to come with each development permit as we continue through the phase.
For each phase, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one more. You mentioned a perceived lack of infrastructure. Can you expand on that, of what the public concerns were and where you feel that there was a gap perhaps in what they view and your view?
Yes, I would love to. So something that we also brought in the public open house, we had all of our transportation, civil, we also had a water model expert at the open house to address people's concerns. One of the issues definitely was water. However, after speaking to the city's engineer, we've had a water modeling report done by Coors. There is enough capacity for water for our site. There's 3 different items that people, we're trying to, that we narrowed it down to. So there's domestic water flow, which there will be sufficient capacity. Fire flow, or if your neighbor's house catches on fire, there's sufficient capacity. The third one is seasonal water restrictions. Water restrictions will happen, I believe, whether our proposal will go forward or not. And that's also for water conservation. And it's also generally aligns with the regional district and pretty much all of the other municipalities we work in Nanaimo, City of Victoria, they all have water restrictions. And so water restrictions will still happen. I think that was an issue that was brought up, that people aren't happy that there's water restrictions and therefore believe that there's a water supply issue.
Just a comment on that. One of the concerns that I heard is people concerned that as more water is drawn out of the rivers, that it's going to affect the ability to recharge the wells downstream. And that even if there may be enough water for a development like this to take place, it's how it's going to impact the downstream consequences of it. I understand it to be separate than just having general water restrictions, but degrading their well fields over time. Have you guys taken a look at what kind of impact that would play for the neighborhoods downstream?
So we looked at, so our water, I'll have to, I think it would be best to answer this question with my water experts and civil experts at a future council date, because I can bring them to present about this issue specifically. But at a high level, my understanding is that our project is still within the OCP capacity limits of that's designated for this area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Chandler?
Thank you. Just through your worship to Brianna again. So when you talk about those capacity limits, you're talking about in the next 10 years kind of thing. You've modeled it out for 10 years down the road kind of idea.
Through your worship, I would say I would have to check the reports.
Okay.
And it might be a question also for the city engineer.
Sure.
But
Okay.
I've been meeting with him on a number of issues.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Your Worship. And one more question to Brianna. Thank you. On the issue of traffic flow and the overuses of the Orange Bridge and so forth. At one time, there was some consideration, the district was going to put in a commercial node as part of the neighborhood development, as well as just residential homes. There was going to be a commercial node, possibly going to go into that area. And that would help alleviate a lot of like trips, into town over the Orange Bridge from the residents in this particular area. It may alleviate some of the traffic concerns. My question is there a commercial node still planned or being considered, or where are you at on that?
Through your worship to Councillor O'Brien, yeah, yes, they're in the CD zone. There is still a small commercial aspect, but it's primarily residential.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You, a couple real quick comments from myself. First off, this is going to be, as you're experienced in other projects, it's going to be a very tedious and long process. The people that are concerned at this point in time, they have to realize that this is going to be a long process. My criticism, if I was going to have one at this point to district, would be that everybody around the table has said this. We don't have enough information. We don't know what we don't know. Before I even say I'm in favor or I'm against the project, I need to know exactly where's this piece going? Where's that piece going? How long before we go to this? There's an umpteen questions that we don't have the knowledge of here. So we can't be expected to make decisions. That's my first criticism. My second criticism from your perspective is you sure picked the wrong time to be doing this. You're coming into an election and you're going to be, you could be dealing with a whole different group of people sitting around this table in 4 or 5 months. And, that'll just be into the next section of the OCP review for here. So, we need a lot more information before we can even move on this, is my view. We'll see what our Director of Planning brings to the table with his presentation here in a bit, but those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Correspondence, we received a piece of correspondence from an E. Gibbons, the CEO of Volleyball BC, letter of appreciation. I need somebody to make a motion to receive and Motion from Counselor Chandler, seconded by Counselor Fraz. All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Russell.
Good evening, Your Worship. For council consideration this evening is the advancement of an official community plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment at 285 Despard Avenue West. At this point, we're seeking council authorization to basically have the developer undertake some additional public consultation, public engagement prior to the preparation of an OCP amendment bylaw. As well, we're also seeking input from relevant agencies, stakeholders in the area. And so the recommendations are per the agenda to advance the proposal to allow for the those referrals and the developer to host an open house. And in the future, we will bring a bylaw back for council to look at.
Thank you. I'm prepared to take all four of the recommendations if so desired. And I need a mover in a second, or moved by Counselor Bryan, second by Counselor Greer. Is there any discussion on this? We're just moving it on to the next level. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Russell?
Okay. If a mayor worship, this one's a little more complicated. It's three applications in one essentially. And so different things are happening with the different files this evening. So at this point in time, this is a follow-up report. Public notice has been given with respect to the development variance permit. In this regard, 2 pieces of correspondence were received from the adjacent property owner. At this time, if someone wishes to speak to the variance application, this would be the time for them to do so if they're in the gallery. So if there is anyone that you can see behind me, let me know and I will wheel off to the side so they may speak. Okay.
Hi. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes. Thank you. My name is Neil Sinclair. I reside at 3380 Beach Drive in Victoria. And I have my son Tosh with me here. We've driven up for the council meeting. Our firm is the company that owns the Robank building adjacent. And I was part of the group that developed the original bank in 1982, and then was responsible for the expansion in 1995 to its current configuration. And we manage the building out of our office on Ocp Avenue in Victoria. 3 of us, my son, myself, and my secretary of 41 years. Unfortunately, I only became aware of this proposal on Thursday of last week. I gather from some heavy reading over the weekend of your agenda information that it's been in the works for some time, but I only became aware of it on Thursday after we received two copies of the public notice the previous day. And so thanks to Mr. Russell, who I had a conversation with this morning, he encouraged me and helped me, gave me direction as to how we could express our thoughts regarding this proposal. And so if the 2 pieces of correspondence you refer to are 2 letters from me, one unsigned and one signed, that's what happens when you're composing a letter at 60 miles an hour driving up Island. And we got it in 6 minutes before the 4 o'clock deadline, the signed one. Sorry about a few spelling mistakes. In any event, I've had a long involvement with this particular piece of property. And of course, have lived with the adjacent property, its previous improvements and its current state. And we've known for a long time that a development would eventually be proposed. And so my comments, and my initial comment in my letter, you'll see, is the building that's proposed seems somewhat attractive. And a commercial and residential mixture would seem to make sense. So I'm looking at this from a developer's point of view as well as the adjacent landlord. However, whichever building and whatever development is approved for the adjacent property, there's something glaring that just jumps right out, which I think is going to be an issue for ourselves and for the owners of the property next door and for the occupants. I gather the front yard of the adjacent property is considered the Jensen Street frontage. So our common property line is the rear. And so there's a requirement for the relaxation of the 4-meter rear yard setback. And that will allow the entrance exit ramp to the underground parking to effectively come right down to our property line. I can see nothing but concern about that. It's will be too close to the entrance to our parking lot, our main entrance to our development. Right across the lane, there's a proposed ingress, egress to the loading bay and 7 parking spaces. And my letter is deficient in not mentioning it's also very approximate to the entrance to the and exit to the Stedman. So you've got 4 vehicular functions happening in very close proximity to one another, including, as I say, the loading bay, but also a pedestrian crosswalk. And so there's going to be a lot of activity. I gather the lane is to be improved, and we just went over there prior to the council meeting, and I reinforced my comment. I just invite anyone to go and actually look at that and imagine traffic coming from all directions. A suggestion for improvement would be to just have one ingress and egress onto the lot on the east side of the lane and have it closer to Jensen. That would remove one movement facilitator. But generally the issue will be the ramp, and it would be highly desirable to move that away from our common property line. The second issue, and it kind of evolved in my mind as I was speaking with Mr. Russell by phone this morning, is with respect to the functionality of the parking on the east side of the lane, which most probably will be where commercial customers of this development will park. Which means unless there's rear entrances into the commercial spaces, and I doubt there will be because it looks like it's going to be residential, that means they're going to have to walk around the building to the Alberni frontage. And a good portion of those, I suspect, are going to walk through our property. And they'll be walking diagonally towards the stairs because we have a retaining wall at the end of our parking. But they'll be walking to our stairs where we have traffic entering the property. It's our main entrance, and the traffic maneuvering. And if they don't feel like parking on the newly developed parking lots, my real fear and the bank's fear is definitely going to be that they'll park on our lot, and that's shorten the distance to those commercial businesses. I should mention, as far as the bank is concerned, I reached out to them on a hurry-up basis on Friday afternoon sent them the public notice. A nice young lady in City Hall mentioned it, that that public notice was actually dropped off on May the 6th to one of the ladies in the teller line, but unfortunately it never found its way to the manager. And I spoke to her again this afternoon as we drove up Island, and I don't have a response from the bank, but I just know them well enough that there's going to be a real concern about people, customers of this building parking in our parking lot. We also have just recently gone through the experience because we have another small property where a large building has been built immediately adjacent right up to the property line. And it's just caused no end of problems in terms of erosion of our property line. In fact, our building has been damaged. If blasting is involved, and I'm going to assume that blasting will be involved here, at the very minimum, I think it would probably be advantageous to have the developer provide a pre-blasting survey and post-blasting survey. What else? Of course, we've got the issue of shadowing, because the closer that building gets to us, we're going to be in the dark, and especially if there's a relaxation of the height. But I also understand that there's a push on in Parksville to bring buildings up to five stories. But my main concern are the first 2 points I mentioned: the confluence of traffic in this one small area and the implications of what's going to happen for our parking lot and the bank's use of that. And then my final comment is, in case this project is approved, I'm wondering if there's anyone from the development company here this evening. And I just wondered if they would have to identify themselves to me, because I'd like to meet them and meet our new potential neighbors. Any questions?
I thought I had it pushed. Thank you very much for your comments. I don't believe there's anybody from the development company here. If I may be mistaken, but not at this point in time. Perhaps Mr. Russell can pass and
He's kindly offered to do so.
okay,
already.
and that's about as good as we can get for that.
Okay.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Your worship.
Now it's your turn.
Well, your worship, I don't know if there's anyone else that's here to speak on the application.
I only saw the one hand
Just the
there
one?
while
Okay,
from the,
sorry. The eyes in the back of my head don't work.
yeah,
Don't work too well.
I understand.
So as I explained, there's basically 3 applications that this report is addressing. For council consideration this evening is the issuance of a development variance permit and the issuance of a development permit. If the development permit is issued, if the development variance permit is issued, then the development permit can be issued. If the development variance permit isn't issued, the development permit would have to be deferred because it would require amendments to all the plans. With respect to the other application, which is a rezoning application, that application is intended to facilitate transforming the bottom floor of the building to allow for a portion of residential up to 50% of the ground floor. And with respect to that application, the proponent hosted their open house event virtually. At this point in time, the next stage in that process would be to introduce the bylaw for consideration of second reading and the setting of a formal statutory public hearing date with respect to that change in land use application. The recommendations are per the agenda, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Councillor Chandler, seconded by Councillor Fraz. Councillor Chandler, do you have a comment? Okay. Any? Councillor Fraz? Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through to Mr. Russell. If we proceed with recommending as all of the suggestions here anyways, to approve them, would we be able to ensure that the copy of the correspondence from the Mr. Sinclair was given at least to the developer for their consideration, just as a courtesy? Would we be able to do that?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor O'Brien, a redacted version in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection Act, in other words, blocking out people's names, could be forwarded on to the agent. As well as I can also, with Mr. Sinclair's permission, if he grants me permission, I can also forward his contact information off to the developer so the developer can contact him directly.
That's appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Fraz, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you through the mayor to Director Russell. Just regarding the comments on the pre-blasting, post-blasting surveys, what kind of requirements are required for the developer to do in those regards?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Fraz, through these processes, it's not a municipal requirement. It would be on the builder's due diligence to do that. I have suggested to the correspondent that they may wish to send a formal letter to the developer. So kind of like if you have concerns with your neighbor's tree, I would always recommend that you send a letter on to that person so that if something does go wrong, you have a paper trail indicating that you express those concerns to the property owner. But we don't have a process that we can impose that request. It would be up to the developer to facilitate that.
Just as a comment, and I would think that the developer's insurance company would probably make that as a requirement as well. I've seen it done many times. Okay. Councillor Patterson and Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship, to our Director of Planning. So far, the public engagement summary, and that was, I don't like to say it, but brief, and I'm assuming that's because most of it was done virtually. And so this is at first, we'll go to second, and they will set a public hearing date to allow for more comments and everything from the public before it gets further back to us again. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, yes, the city will set the public hearing date for its statutory public hearing process, correct?
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to our Director of Planning, what would, I guess the zero lot line that Mr. Sinclair spoke about concerns me a bit. Can you speak to that, Blaine, and perhaps offer any sort of suggestions that might alleviate some of his concerns?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wilson. I don't know if I'm able to alleviate his concerns, but I will say that the majority of rear lot lines in the downtown actually front the laneway. And in this case, it's just a peculiarity of the shape of this lot, because the length of this lot ends up with its shortest lot line along Jensen. That's really the only reason why that rear lot line happens to be adjacent to the neighboring property. If the dimensions of the lot were different, it would more typically be along the laneway. Most of the lots in the downtown tend to have their depth from the street being greater. And in most cases, that's on a more predominant street. In this case, it's kind of reverse. So most lots in the downtown would have a zero lot line as the interior lot line setback. This is sort of an anomaly to that.
Could I have a follow-up, please? I guess, Blaine, then, if there were less than a zero lot, if we allotted a little bit more difference between the two lot lines, would that be possible in this case? Or how much is that going to impact the developer's plans, do you think? If he didn't get a 0 lot line setback?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wilson. So if no variance was granted at all, I think it would be some pretty major reworking of the building plans. The other thing is to keep in mind is, while it may be possible, and again, I'd have to look at the plans to see if there's enough room, whether or not it's possible to shift the building slightly towards Jensen. You may end up in the future with, like a 1 meter corridor, like, the property to the north at some time will be redeveloped as well. And so it would have the benefit of a 0 lot line setback under its zoning. So it's conceivable in, say, 20 years that northern property may be redeveloped with a building that abuts its property line. So there's a possibility you end up with a 1 meter corridor or something like that. So it would be, I think it would be a major rework. Certainly we would have to go back to the developer if that was the case.
Thanks, Blaine.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a 4-story mixed commercial, multi-unit residential, and that. What is the current height of the property, the RBC Bank? Is it a 3-story? Would it be comparable? I'm trying to think of the, as Mr. Sinclair said, some of the shadowing issues.
If Mayor Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, I don't know the number of floors specifically. I believe it's a 2-story building, although being a commercial building, they tend to have, larger heights, more sort of, in this room is 1 story, but spatially it's kind of 2. I don't think the bank has quite as vaulted ceilings as we do in the council chambers, but it would have higher ceilings than a typical floor. So maybe approximately 2.5 stories, but I don't have the height memorized, unfortunately.
All right. No further questions?
Just a comment to Councillor too. I believe when the presenter came, they had a shadowing model done for us. So if we go back in those agendas, we should be able to find those pages to review those, and also for the public's knowledge too. They can see what the shadowing effects were.
All right. Going to call the question. Oh, heard me? Did you say? Oh, I thought you said something. Sorry. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Were you slow at saying yes or fast at saying no? I'm not sure, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, I'm saying yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Passed unanimously. Move on to the next stage with that one. Thank you. Mr. Russell, please. Seems to be your night.
If your Mayor Worship, for council consideration is advancement of an official community plan amendment and zoning development amendment bylaw at 1465 Grieg Road. That was one of our delegations this evening. At this point, at this juncture, the applicant has now completed their public engagement, and we're seeking council approval to just move ahead with sending referrals to different agencies that would have an interest on this type of application, such as the Regional District of Nanaimo, the school district, et cetera, that are outlined in the report. There are a number of technical items that we're currently reviewing that the applicant has submitted. There are things where we'll be seeking further detail for council. There will be a follow-up report, as is noted in the recommendations, where we'll be bringing the details of a number of items for council consideration. These include firming up things such as offsite infrastructure, commitments to different things, precisely how much green space and where is that green space located, those sorts of things. So we are reviewing draft covenants, but some of that key information just needs to be solidified. We've certainly had those discussions with the proponent, and our expectation would be when we report back to council that we would have more information on those details. I do want to address some concerns that have been expressed with respect to tree removal. So I will say that so much as a blade of grass, or not maybe a little bit more than a blade of grass, can't really be removed without getting a development permit. The property is covered with a number of development permit areas as outlined in the report, including the entire properties within the Douglas Fir ecosystem development permit area. It's in a floodplain development permit area. It's in the water course protection development permit area. So prior to any land alteration or construction or subdivision of that land, it will require much more due diligence on a application by application basis, detailing with those specific plans. But there's certainly things that where more detail is being worked on with the developer to bring that forward as the application moves further on in the process. In many ways, this is at a fairly, in some ways, an initial stage in the process to do these referrals to these other agencies. With respect to an official community plan amendment, the legislation is such that before we even prepare the official community plan amendment bylaw, that there be additional public engagement, such as what the developer has done through their hosted open house, as well as referrals to the agencies so named in the report. So the recommendations are per the agenda, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Chandler. Discussion. I've got Councillor Frazan and Councillor Patterson.
Thank Councillor Wilson, I guess there. Just a couple of comments I want to make. Is one, the district group, I felt over these last years of getting to know them and having them do some work in our community, have been really trying to establish a relationship of trust that I've seen happen through their listening very intently and being quick to respond when concerns came up. As you know, some things didn't go perfectly with the wait list for the housing, and then it being changed. They were quick to change it back for up on Mulliot and Despard. And as well, looking at this public consultation process, a couple of things that really impressed me so far is that how they were listening about the, protecting a 500-year floodplain area. And as well, when they mentioned about sending out notices to public to over 600 addresses, quite often one of my big grievances is that when developments happen, they do the bare minimum as far as, it's often, I think 50 meters is the notice area. And so I really do appreciate that they're listening and responding to what's been coming up so far. I believe they're going to continue to do that. And I appreciate the amount of public input they've been seeking and their openness to finding out what works well for Parksville and how they can make it happen. So I know this is a very early stage, but I do feel comfortable with advancing this to the next stage here because of that relationship that they built with us, founded on trust. So just want to make those comments because I think they deserve that recognition, because it has been a project that's very much anxious for the community. And I think it will continue to be so until we can really see how this plan comes together.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And like Councillor Fraz, I think I echo a lot of his sentiment and comments as well. This isn't a one develop and done group. We've already seen them, obviously, in our community. And I'll be honest, I wasn't overly in favor of the development on Despard and Moliet. I didn't feel that it was in the best interest in expanding our growth and everything in the community and having further residents and that, but it's coming along. Our OCP definitely said that that's what it was looking at, and I do greatly believe in trying to follow our OCP as we go, and making exceptions and allowing our residents to engage and that with us and having that feedback come back to us. This is going to be a very, very, very long process. And we will get to know this group, the district group, quite a bit, I believe, in the future. And as Councillor Fraz has said, this is only the very beginning. And I do very much appreciate the amount of engagement that's been going on. We do have quite a bit of concerns and are looking forward to getting more information and going the next step. As I've said, we've talked about water and floodplains and ecological and fire and so many different aspects of this development. So this is a first step to see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in favor of advancing this project at this particular time to enable them to get to the next stages where they provide us with that valuable information that is we're seem to be lacking now. But in order to get that, we have to take it past this stage. So that's why I'm fully in support of this moving forward to give them the opportunity to advise the public as well as council what their intentions are for the entire project. So I will support this.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Greer, and then me.
Thank you. Through your worship, just a comment. I also am in favor of moving this forward. I think district group has definitely demonstrated that they're able to listen and put together something really special for our community. Whether or not this fully goes through or what happens, I think it's we look at what they've done so far. I think they've got a beautiful property coming together, and you look at what we originally looked at there. They had a lot of response on building the retaining areas there, or the buffers, if you will, for the height in that building over in Despard, and I think overall there's no doubt that they're able to do a lot of things that they're asked to do. So I'm again, I'm fully supportive of moving it forward to the next level, because I think they've invested a lot into the community so far, and I think they're a bona fide developer, quite honestly. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. All of the comments make sense as well, and we don't have enough information. So I agree with the councillors on moving it forward in some way, but I do want to point out that staff in their analysis suggested that it could be denied because it may be more appropriate if we believe, council believes, the scope of the proposal and the overall future land use concept could be revisited as part of the City of Parksville's next comprehensive official community plan review. And I think that speaks to what you, the mayor, was speaking about. We're coming up to an OCP review, probably very early on in the next term. So yes, we need more information, but at the same time, my feeling is that we do need to look at this in the big picture and what this is going to mean for Parksville. This is nothing against the district group or what they're doing or that they wouldn't do a great job. It has to do with what's right for our vision of Parksville. So my concern is, should this project wait until we have an OCP review? So I'm a bit on the fence about this, because I also think that we do need more information as to what they're going to do. And I suppose we could still say, even if it goes out to public comment, that we still want it to go for an OCP review first. Anyway, those are just my comments on that. So as I say, I'm not sure right now how I feel about which way it should go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think definitely we should go ahead and see what comes of this. But I can understand how frightened a lot of people are with such a large development. I've been dealing with municipal politics, I guess, since I was 20 years old, being in the newspaper business and being on council, one other term in Qualicum Beach. Qualica was always frightened, going back 35 years ago, of any development. They didn't want anybody else to come to their community. And here we are 35 years later. I think they had 3,000 population when I was there, and now they have over 9,000. So you can't stop progress. It's just as long as things are done in a proper manner. And I feel that this group, at the end of the day, will come up with a really good plan that'll satisfy everybody. And it'll be part of the growth of the city for years to come. I mean, we're not going to stay at this amount of people forever. And developments are going to come. There's going to be far greater, bigger developments coming after this development. So we shouldn't be frightened of things like this, but we should make sure that it becomes a really good and a viable development. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to support Councillor Fraz's comments about credibility. Started a while ago. I had a very distraught lady contact me and say I was all lined up to go into one of their units out over on Molliette. And as it turns out, they said it was a 55+ building. And so she was, very distraught that she wasn't going to be able to move in with her child. I arranged a meeting with Brandon. We got together. We talked about it for about 5 minutes. And within 2 days, I got the phone call that said, wait a minute, there was a mistake made here and it should have never been that way. And he corrected it immediately. So for that alone, I give him lots of kudos on bringing it forward. So I'm willing to, I can't, as I said earlier, I can't make a decision on what we have. And we need more details. But I realize that we can't go forward without consideration from the agencies, and the agencies won't start making their comments unless we put this forward to the next step. So we're caught here now with the fact that we've got to go one more step to hear what the agencies say. Then the developer will be able to hopefully start to formalize some plans and say, this is what we're going to do specifically on this piece of property. And then we can start to make some informed decisions at that point in time. But without us going to the next step, we're never going to find out what's going on. So I think that this has, I know that it has to go on to the next step. So I'm going to be supporting these recommendations. Any other comments? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations? All right, it's unanimous. Thank you. Ms. Weeks, please.
Thank you. This report is for council consideration regarding the option of mail ballot voting for the upcoming local government election. Mail ballot voting is designated designed to allow electors to cast ballots in an election without attending a voting place in person. Offering mail ballot voting is optional and not currently authorized by the city's election procedures bylaw. So traditionally, the demand for mail-in ballot voting for the city has been low. However, with the ongoing pandemic and Parksville's demographic, providing this option is a way to reduce barriers and offer a safe and flexible alternative to in-person voting. So changes to the election bylaws must be adopted by July 4th, and the recommendations per the council agenda.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Chandler. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. I'm a little surprised that there wasn't a seconder, to be honest. I think that this is definitely way of the future. We still live in a very senior-oriented community. And that being said, there are still people that are very shy to venture out and about in areas that have a lot of people in attendance. But I have a question, is cost on that. So if I may,
That's a good
your
question.
worship.
Thank you. Do we have an answer?
Your worship, not exactly.
Doesn't help.
We estimated, we don't believe it'll be over $5,000, but still something that we're looking into. There will be some costs for materials for envelopes and postage. But it's something that we've never done here at the city, at least in my time. So it's a bit of an unknown, but I can definitely double check with other municipalities as well and see how much extra it would be.
I'll come to you. I just need a point of clarification because I might have missed it. Help me understand. Are we going to send out a ballot to every person in town or just those people that require?
Just the people that would require, that they would have to register.
Okay, thank you. That's Councilor Frass.
Thank you. Through the mayor to our chief election officer. I got multiple questions on this one. If it's only going to be for the people that require it, but it was already available for the people who require it, how is this any different than what was done in the past?
It has to be in our bylaw. And it's not currently.
But we had done this in the past without a bylaw.
No.
It says here that there was a circumstance where mail ballots were permitted to persons with physical disability, illness, or injury affected their ability to vote at a voting place and persons who expect to be absent from municipality on general voting days. So it was available previously.
Through your worship. That's just in the legislation. So previously in legislation, it was available only to those with physical disabilities, and the province has changed that. So it is eligible for everybody now,
It's for everybody.
but it has to be in our bylaw.
As long as they want it, they can request it and get a mail-in ballot. Another question is, where is this coming from? This wasn't a council direction. I haven't heard these kind of concerns raised by the public. I haven't heard people requesting this. Where is this being initiated from?
From staff. Through you to Councilor Frass.
I'll leave it at that for now.
Councilor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. And further to the comments is that I have not seen any discussion or concerns about having it on the mail ballots. I know when it went through on federally and provincially, I believe it was approved mail ballot, which was right smack in the middle of the pandemic. It seemed to work fine, but there was numerous problems. And one of the problems being is that the counting of the mail ballots seemed to lag everything else for some reason, even though that they're supposed to be received at the same time. So the decisions were not made final until the final mail ballot had been counted. And I understand part of the process was it was not so much the counting of the votes that were mailed in, it was a verification that they were legitimate mail ballots and so forth. And that's what the time issuance was. And it was not run very smoothly. And there's very many stipulations on the Elections Act to make sure that everything was done in an impartial way at the voting polling stations, which they do. But at the same time, and I'm referring to the fact that scrutineers are allowed at voting polls and so forth, but in a mail-in ballot type of thing, there's no scrutinization possible. So I don't know how that would happen as to ascertain that the mail ballot was sent indeed to a resident that was deserving of it. And it leaves just a little bit too much opportunity for fraud, and that I'm not comfortable with, quite frankly, at this time. So I will not support it at this time.
Councilor Chandler, then Councilor Greer.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I seconded this to get some conversation going as well on this. I'm not necessarily 100% in favor of it. A couple of very good points brought up. I don't like the idea that it's going to delay things until the last mail ballot is counted. I think it's very important to get those results quickly. I know that took, I think, almost a week before the provincial election got sorted out. So, And I think, in general, I'm not a big fan of mail-in voting in the first place. I think that, it's certainly definitely a safety issue and somebody that's restricted, unfortunately, we're dealing with a whole new variance now of, we've got all these different folks that are going to have some concerns out it, from a health perspective. So, how do we deal with that? But I don't know if I'll support this, only just simply because I want a bit more information about it, how it would work possibly. So at this point, I'll just listen to a bit more conversation, and make a decision at that point.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Amanda. We've never, in these old age homes where there are 25 people or whatever, how have we handled that before? I believe we did give them some ballots. They marked them in those homes. Somebody was responsible, and then they brought them to the city. Is that correct?
Your worship. Yes, we do special voting opportunities in at least 3 of our senior facilities here. And we would continue to do that in this election as well.
Yeah, I have no problem with that, as long as somebody is held responsible to make sure there's no extra balance and that all the ballots are filled out or returned if they're not filled out. But this creates a whole new can of worms when we start to have mail-in ballots. There's absolutely no way in a democracy that you can run a good democracy by mailing out floods of ballots and not knowing where they all went, how many are coming back that are marked properly, and so on. We've always, I guess, over 100 years or more, we've always gone to the ballot ourselves, marked our own ballots, and was there in person to identify ourselves. And I see no reason at this stage to change that. So I'll not support this motion. Thanks.
My concern here is the fact that we, especially at the council level, when we get down into counting the vote, when the votes, the differences in the votes, some of the times it's 10 or 15 or 20 votes difference between the person that wins and the person that doesn't win. What we're saying here now is that you're going to have to wait until we counted the mail-in. I have no idea how many numbers. If we're talking 20, that's one thing. I got to believe that we're going to be talking a lot more than 20 votes. If we give people the opportunity to mail it in, a lot of people will take advantage of that opportunity. And therefore, we're going to have a result that we can't verify for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, whatever it takes after to get this all done, because the process isn't quite as clear and simple as what we're going through when somebody comes in and marks their X on a ballot. So that's my concern about doing this. I understand why some people want to do it, why the province is probably looking at it. I find it interesting that they're taking away the right to vote for a union, but they won't. They give you this one instead with a ballot. But other than that, I can't support it. I'm sorry. Councilor Fred, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add some comments. It's definitely not something that I can support as well. I've particularly believe that an important aspect of life is showing up, especially at the polling stations. And I've worked at the polling stations myself on the provincial and the federal levels, and recognize that when you go behind that privacy screen, you can vote your conscience and not be subject to the pressure of friends or family who may be looking over your shoulder and encouraging to vote a certain way. You might always think that in your household that you have the ability to vote how you want, but it's not the case for everybody. There's some very political aspects of life there where they may be filling out those ballots and mailing them in. And I think those who show up are the ones who get to have their voices heard too. So I don't see a problem with the way we've been doing it, particularly since those who are unable or out of town have already had that option. I don't think we need to change it. To me, it's a solution in search of a problem. And I think we should just stick with the tried, tested, and true way that we've been doing it.
Councilor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few comments. I I absolutely loved the time that my children were able to vote, sitting at the table, having a discussion, being very open-minded and giving them options and allowing them to look at different, or not allowing, but to show them where they could find information on candidates and to be able to research and find out what they felt was always in the best interest of Parksville. Now, I believe in technology, and I believe in that in the future, we probably will not have going to the different centers and placing an X on a ballot and everything in the future, but that's in the future, obviously. So to being able to allow anyone the opportunity to vote that they can, if they are not there on the advanced voting dates or on the general election date, I think is always important. I've had some family in hospital and such at times that there is no possible way that they could have gotten out and voted. I also had my mother move to another province and wasn't able to vote. And she was so upset just because of the time period that she had to be a resident and everything in that community. So I'm disheartened a bit. I respect and understand where other members of council are saying and everything, but you don't know until you know, and this doesn't allow us the opportunity to go forward. So, thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just make one comment that I really think that on a municipal level, I don't think it's necessary to go this route right now. And as Councillor Patterson said, eventually we probably will be voting online or through a ballot or, mail-in ballots or even online, who knows? But right now, I think it's not necessary for a municipality for us to change it right now. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, everybody's had it. We're all going on, so let's call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Got it all? Okay, thank you. Bylaws. Second reading and scheduling of a public hearing for zoning and a development amendment bylaw 2022, number 2000.133, to facilitate residential use on a portion of the first story of the building at 164 Alberni Highway. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Chandler, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in, discussion, sorry, should ask for that first. Discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Final adoption, zoning and development bylaw amendment 2022, number 132. It's a map amendment at 1222 Industrial Way. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. All right. I have two recommendations, so I'm going to bring them up. Have it all written down so that I can at least keep in sequence here. First motion I'm bringing forward today is, to me, is an exciting one. It will help provide assistance to those first-time home buyers who can afford the monthly mortgage payments but have been unable to save the down payment. I'd like to make the motion that staff review the proposal to create a city-sponsored home ownership made easy plan, providing down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. The purpose of the review will be to provide input on what will be required to implement this program if it is approved by council. And I'd ask for a seconder, Councillor Grieg, who's seconding it. One of the reasons I'm so looking forward to it and why I said I was excited about it is, just give you a little history, is back in 1977, my young family was moving to Welland, Ontario, and a very similar plan to this was available. And with the help of my family, we were able to garner enough of a down payment to buy our first home. Yes, it was substantially cheaper than anything available today, but our family income was also very low by comparison. We could make the mortgage payments, but we could not scrape together the down payment. I shudder to think how different my life would have been had this program not been available to me. I would like to have said that I came up with this idea all by myself because it's a great plan. But this plan was developed in the city of Langford, and His Worship Stu Young put it together. When I talked to him, he said it was being very well received by hundreds of applicants. What I like about this proposal is that it helps first-time home buyers. It would be only available to those individuals who lived in Parksville for a minimum of 2 years. It is available on what is now being considered moderately priced housing for all intents and purposes with no cost to the taxpayer of Parksville. To break it down to its simplest form, today when a developer receives a rezoning or an uplift, we talked about this earlier today, to the density of a property, they are asked to make a community amenity contribution. Just the last meeting, there was discussions that we would upgrade a zoning, that we had a request to upgrade a zoning. The developer would contribute $1,000 for every unit on the site. In this proposal, the developer would make their community amenity contribution to Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. In all future developments for stratas, we would give the developer the option to put in several more moderately priced units up to 2-bedroom, not exceeding 900 square feet. These could not exceed $490,000. For every unit that is offered under this program, the developer could increase the maximum density by an equal amount. We would form an independent committee that would review applicants for approval. The applicant would have to be pre-approved for a mortgage. For a $490,000 unit, a 5% down payment would amount to approximately $25,000, of which $17,500 would be provided under this grant. This grant would not have to be repaid unless the owner sells the unit in the first 5 years or puts the unit up for rent. It must be the owner's primary residence. If the owner does not meet these guidelines, then the $17,500 would have to be repaid to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. The beauty of this is that a substantial amount of the legwork has been done by Langford, and we should be able to draw on their experiences. Just to be clear, this is a pilot program, and after the first 3 to 5 units, we can evaluate the program and decide what needs to be changed, if anything. I ask council's endorsement of this to see if we can help 3 to 5 families get into their first owned home here in the city of Parksville. And then we can look at it from there and go forward. Thank you. Seconded. Okay, we've got 2 seconders. Councilor. All right, discussion. Councilor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I will also read from what I prepared anyway, so I don't get off track. The comments in the background information was, one of the comments was it's difficult to accumulate The necessary down payment and senior levels of government programs are not helpful in your preamble here. However, last month, the federal government announced their first time home ownership program, which allows for saving funds in a registered fund that is tax deductible, as well as accumulates tax-free interest. The initial response has been well accepted already. And this is the federal government taking the lead because of course, that is actually what they should be doing. This is a federal responsibility and possibly provincial responsibility, but I do not feel it as a municipal responsibility. Long and short of it, the city of Parksville is not a bank. To suggest the city of Parksville would provide $17,500 towards a down payment has so many rules and mechanics to actually make it happen. It would be just a nightmare to try and administer this program. And basically the banks have always taken the position of there's no free ride on the road to home ownership. Anyone wishing to purchase a home must first demonstrate the ability to save sufficient funds to create a down payment, thereby verifying sufficient resources to pay monthly payments. The $1,000, so that's my first point, is that, if you're not able to save a down payment, then are you going to have difficulty making your mortgage payments? The $1,000 amenity, you refer to it, I'm trying to get your right terminology here, but anyways, the contribution from the developer would be in place of you're suggesting a $1,000 payment from developers. However, you suggested, if I'm not mistaken, that would actually be taking the place of, like, currently we already request amenities, as we have demonstrated in this evening's different developers proposals. So if it's taking the place of what we're asking for as amenities, which our planning department does on a regular basis, and instead putting into a fund for a down payment for some lucky individual, well, then it is actually a direct cost to the taxpayers, because instead of getting an amenity that was possibly going to the fire department and so forth, without that amenity, it means that then the costs of running the fire department in that particular case would be less all those amenities offered, like $800 a unit or $1,000 a unit, whatever it is. And so it is a cost to the taxpayer, because there would be less money being put into the fire department budget. The administration of a program as proposed would require huge staffing increases. I'm just blown away that this would even be considered at our level. Increase to ensure all the details and conditions are adhered to. More staff, more tax dollars. There's another tax, because I can't see how our staff, which would have to be administration along with finance and so forth, would be checking, verifying and choosing the lucky recipients. And it's going to be a huge undertaking of an already overworked staff that has just told us time and time again on how busy they are. And the thing is that we're just throwing another level of bureaucracy on them to administer. So I cannot support this the motion.
Okay, I'm going to respond to that first, and then we'll go first. First off, it's not that complicated. The developers currently now provide the community amenity contributions, and it goes into the reserve fund, and it's not oodles of staff. In fact, there'll be virtually no additional staff requirements, or there won't be any requirements for it. As far as you would think, after 3 years and change, you would understand that the fire department doesn't get the community amenity contribution that goes to them. It goes into the general funds of the city. That doesn't go to them, so it doesn't help defer the price of the operations budget of the fire department. It just goes into the city coffers for that. The banks do not care where the down payment comes from, as long as you have it. Their concern is, can you make the monthly mortgage payments? On this particular case, the monthly mortgage payment is $1,973 a month, which is less than the $2,000 that most of our people are paying right now for rent. So I think that the people that would be there would be able to afford the ongoing monthly mortgage payments. This is not a boondoggle. It has been put in place. There's Langford has had over 200 applications already. Now that's going back about 2 months ago. They had 200 applications within the first few months of putting the proposal out. The people really, really responded to it. I'm not suggesting that it's going to be, I'm saying let's go 3 to 5 and let's find out what this will do. This has nothing to do with the city staff. We're not going to be looking at it. Nobody at this table will be approving or declining anybody. As I said in both my write-ups and in what I just said now, this will be, we will establish some type of a committee outside of the city of Parksville employees and council that will pass and review all of the applications, just as they do in Langford. Councillor Fraz.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying I really applaud this initiative and this kind of idea coming forward here. I think we've all been seeing the incredible skyrocketing costs of home ownership. And to me, it strikes me a bit out of touch to think that if people can't afford to save for their down payments, that they shouldn't have the benefit of trying to have home ownership these days. It's quite a different world than it was even just 10 years ago or 15 years ago, getting into home ownership. As far as the amenity contributions from developers, we've seen that previously be around $800 per door. And today we saw the first group mention they were offering $1,000 just as kind of a touch point. It seemed like they were willing to negotiate that a bit. And the second one at $1,600 per door, so doubling that amount. I think this is a great opportunity for those developers to say, hey, look, we're willing to put this much X amount of dollars, particularly in an uplift scenario, towards covering the down payment of homes. You look at a project like where they're going to build 800, want to build 800 units. They could be essentially dedicating some of those homes to first-time home buyers where they cover the down payments for them and get people in the door. As far as it being a federal provincial responsibility, this type of a issue is an all hands on deck responsibility. I think if you have the ability to do something about it, then we should be jumping at the opportunity. I think the community would be very proud to see options like this come forward as we try to attract younger families and into our community to try to make it more vibrant for job opportunities and so on. It gets the people that are living in their parents' basement or are not able to afford to get out of their home a chance to start a life and have their own family. To me, this is definitely a plan that I think we should be exploring and definitely not throwing it out of the door at the first step here. There's so much opportunity here. I really think that we need to move forward on this.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, through your worship. Yeah, a couple of comments. I do agree that, the federal level is where we're looking at affordable housing. I mean, that's a key component to the whole process here, is that they need to make it affordable. Right now, it's not even affordable to be on an RV pad. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's like RVs are now dealing with $1,600 and $2,000 a month RV pads now, as well as the cost of their units. So it's pretty scary. There's a lot of things going on that are, that require a lot of rental type assistance in that respect. As far as the home ownership side of things, I think, again, as Councillor Fraz says, I think all hands on deck. I think anything helps. I like the idea of a pilot project only because that's what it is. It's a pilot project. It's not going to be a large amount of work and not a large amount of finances either. It's just something to see if it works. And then perhaps the federal government would get behind this to all municipalities and make it work even better. Who knows? Ultimately, what we have to do is just chip away at little pieces and making sure that it's something that we're doing that's positive, as opposed to just waiting for somebody else to come along and fix the problem, because that isn't going to happen. We need to make things happen ourselves. I support this mainly because after reading it, I thought there's there's going to be a lot of this. People are sitting around the tables just like us right now, trying to find out ways to help people. You know, the fact that somebody that owns a home now wasn't helped like this is unfortunate, but at this point, it's not really about that. It's about looking forward to bringing more people into the community, and maybe that's a hook. Maybe it's a way to get people to buy here and younger families in here and, you know, growing the community. So I'd like to take the next step at this, so I would support it for that reason. Certainly interested in knowing that it's not going to take a lot of extra time at staff level. And as long as that's the case, then I fully support it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I'm worried about it coming so close to the end of our term. And there are a few other programs that exist. There's the affordable home ownership, that program that exists right now. I know it's different, but there is that program out there. The other thing that does worry me is that there is going to be staff time, and our CAO has warned us over and over. We've been asked not to make motions anymore. We've had to take motions off the table. So here we are in the last 4 months making rather major motions. So once again, I'm not saying that I don't like your idea or that it won't work. It's the timing of it, and and it will require staff, and it'll even require staff to put some what are you calling it? Group together who's going to, you know, decide who's going to get this housing. So there are a lot of issues and a lot of components to this. And I guess there's something that's mentioned in there is what you consider a moderate price in today's economic, the economics of buying a house today. Who knows what a moderate price is? You're saying $490, who knows? I really feel I'd like to, before I make any decision, I would like to, through you, ask our CAO about staff time on this, if I could, if she has any input.
Sure.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Wilson, I don't really know how much staff time would be involved. The first thing that we would do is reach out to Langford and see exactly what they do and how they do it. I just don't know the mechanism that they're using, but if another local government is doing it, that will help. And I really can't comment on how much more staff time it would be, but the motion is to come back, for staff to come back. And so I guess, like I often do, I would ask as part of the discussion, if council is moving forward with this, what is the priority? Because we would need to look at basically shifting something off someone else's desk. I know that housing is one of council's strategic priorities, but we do have a lot of stuff which we would need to kind of, I guess, come back to council and say, we're going to switch this one for something else. Like I can see finance and planning having to perhaps provide some input. And so we do have a few planning things that are like one example that kind of jumps out to me is we would probably have to switch this with the patio guidelines, which I think we have until spring of 2023 to tackle. So we would try to find something that's, you know, a similar amount of time on the same department or a burden on the same department, and we would have to switch it out. But at this point, it's not something I'm familiar with. I just don't know enough about it at this point to comment on how much staff time, but I will say every motion, regardless of how small it seems, it always takes staff time. It's up to us, or up to me, I guess, to prioritize based on what we believe council establishes as priorities. And so that's where we do need more input from council. We are planning to bring back our big list in a couple of meetings. Basically, we usually bring it back kind of around July timeframe. Given that this is obviously a different year than normal, we're just working on establishing the status of those projects, but there would have to be some further discussion with council on the priority and where this fits in the queue and what gets pushed back in terms of priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can please just finish my comment then, Your Worship?
You sure can.
Yes, thank you. So thank you, Kiva, for that. But I do recall that the time you allotted for a letter of support that I had wanted to put through was 7 hours. So that just tells me that there is a lot of staff time that goes into this. So I think, I really do think that this proposal is as nice as it is, and it may work, and it's been done in Langford, but I really think with 4 months to go, that we should defer this to the next term. I feel that maybe not nix it, but just, put it down, and when the new council comes in, then, they can determine whether or not to keep it on the list and move forward and not put any more burden on our staff. So that's where I'm at with this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, and your suggestion that there was no staff time, it would take no more extra staff time. In your own preamble, you say the city would provide the conduit to collect the monies from developers, execute any necessary documents, and forward the funding to the purchaser's lawyer at closing. Just that in staff time alone is phenomenal, because it's all legal. We're talking thousands of dollars. We're talking disbursements of money. So, and it goes on, and then it would be decided by a committee that would actually make the decision on who is going to be lucky enough to receive this. Well, that committee, if it was to be formed, would be formed at the with the abilities of our administration staff saying, this is what this committee has to look like. This is what they have to consider, and all sorts of rules of engagement. Once again, it's staff time. To suggest that the staff have the ability to do it. Councillor Wilson just mentioned the fact that we have received many notices from our CAO to say that we are out of time to even get done what we have. And to introduce this at this particular time is like, haven't you been listening to our CAO? Because she has said she's desperate, because we're so they are so up to their eyeballs that they won't even get done what we've already passed motions for to have done. So why would we even take on another project of this magnitude at this time? It's not fair.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really wish that this had come forward in the first year of council, obviously. It is one of our priorities. We established that in the first year of our term. I fully understand where it's coming from, and I do support it, but not at this time. I believe that we have organizations that can really help us. In the past, we've had properties that we've donated to Habitat for Humanity, being one. In our first term, and even in my last term, we went around our community and looked at all the pieces of property that the city owns, and thought, okay, what if we donate these to a builder or something for building homes or co-ops or something to that effect. And we didn't get anywhere with it. And we're in our last year and that now, and I'm sorry, I'm just blunt. So like Councillor Wilson has said as well, I just feel that this needs to be moved to the next council. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor O'Brien, I have been listening. I've been listening to the public. I've been listening to all the people that call us constantly or send me emails that say that their children want to come back to Parksville, but they can't because they can't afford to buy a house. I Listen to the people that say they can't raise the down payment for the house. I also look at and I listen to what the federal government is putting forward, this great plan that you're talking about. They haven't even drawn up what they're going to do. So you can't tell me that it's this big, massive plan that they're going to put in and there's a great deal of interest in it. There's absolutely none. It's a savings account is what it is. And we've always had savings accounts that we could use for this. We had RRSPs that we could use for it. None of those things have done it because it's not the check that's written. Our priority in this council, the number one priority was to attract young families. How do you attract young families? By providing housing for them. And a good portion of them would love to own their own home if they possibly can. So yeah, maybe we do have to change our priorities. Maybe we have to say, stop, let's take that out of there and let's put this in place of it. And it's not going to be thousands of dollars for, the exaggerations are always amazing that I hear about this kind of stuff when there's a discussion. But you know what? At this point in time, we need to do this. No, we can't wait. We keep waiting. Councilor Patterson just said we could have had it in the first year and we've waited and we've waited and we've waited and we've waited to come up to this. Now we're here. If we wait until the next time, then they're going to wait and wait and wait and wait. And they'll be 3 years into their term and then it won't get done again. We need to move and we need to move now. We need to get it moving forward. It's 3 to 5 units. It's not 200 units. It's not a program that's going to be insurmountable. It is something that can be put together relatively fast, contrary to what Councillor O'Brien says. This can be done because we know that our friends down the road have done it already. They've got the paperwork done. They can tell us exactly how. And yeah, it's going to take a couple of hours. It'll take us some time to do it, but it is a priority that the people of Parksville need. So, Councillor Frass.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. I think something to keep in mind as some perspective here is what this motion is asking for is very exploratory at this point. It's asking for staff to have a review of what and provide us input on what would be required to implement this program. This is not saying implement a program. We don't know what the details of it are. And I think it's worth reminding that we just alleviated staff of the time it would take to do mail-in ballots, which had an unknown amount of time, an unknown cost to it. And they were prepared to do that without council direction. It was their own initiative that they came up with in preparation for the fall. So I do think there's able to make some adjustments to the timing to entertain something that's exploratory like this, which is, has been mentioned, part of our priorities. I think this is a no-brainer to me to take this step and move forward on it. When we get back that input from staff, then we can speak a little more educated as far as to what's really involved, what Langford is doing. At this point, we don't really have much of an idea. We're just taking guesses and arguing the fact of staff time again, which is an unknown at this point. We can, at the next meeting or so on down the line, take a look at what that list is and see what's going to come off there. We've already seen it before, and there's some placeholder kind of projects. I know one of my own motion I put forward, but the garbage cans have been waiting for. I don't expect that to see the light of day. Maybe we'll take that one off there and there's a few more hours opened up because that was a council motion that's already been passed. So to me, to reject it at this point would just make no sense at all. I can appreciate some of the concerns, but I just don't think they're valid when we're looking at exploratory at this point.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, through your worship. Just a comment again, I like what Councillor Frass is saying there. I think really what we're looking at is just the exploration of the idea is something that we can afford to do. Yes, it will take a bit of time. There's no doubt it will take some time. And as my previous comment is, I hope it doesn't take a lot of time. But the fact is, we don't know what we don't know, as the mayor always says. And I think it's important at this stage just to explore it. It's exploratory. That's it. So that's the reason I would propose that we look at it. I'm not even sure how it's going to fold out. We're talking about 3 to 5 units. That doesn't seem like a lot of headaches in this case. So that's where I'm at with it. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, just to go back to just getting a staff to do a report on it, is that our staff don't do anything halfway. They do an excellent job on every report and they consider all the ramifications 6 ways to Sunday. And that's great in what they do it, but they do it and they do it thoroughly because they involve so many of their people and so many experts and so forth that they give us a report that's concise and is very accurate. And that takes a lot of time. It's huge. As for your suggestions that the federal government program that I described already, I won't go into it again. All that I did was just copy verbatim from the Globe and Mail, received recently anyways. The Globe and Mail described this program. The Globe and Mail also said it's a very worthwhile program that has the greatest chance of success. And actually, not that they ever applaud the government's decision, but they said it is a worthwhile program that has many advantages by going through it, and it is going forward. It's not hung up. It's already working right now for applications. And then the only other comment I have to say is about the dozens of emails you have received regarding from individuals saying they can't afford a down payment. Now, I don't know about dozens, and I don't know about any, but unless they just went specifically to mayor and instead of mayor and council, I honestly can't recall any regarding that they don't have money for down payment and the city of Parksville should do something about it. I have not seen any. If you'd like to forward those to me, then it may make me look at it a little differently, but I have not seen any. It is not our position at this time at the municipal level to be providing down payments from whatever scheme. It's just not there. There's lots of emails we get about the market pricing, where they are right now, and I get it. But the thing is that there's no way this council nor any other form of government can control market pricing. And that's unfortunately, that's reality. But the thing is that, so it's not our place, and I back off and let the banks and the other higher levels of government take care of the situation, if there is indeed a situation.
I'm going to call the question. Councillor Patterson, did you have a comment before we? I'll let her.
My only comment, and that in your memo and summary and everything, is that you're needing more than 5% down, that you're needing almost 25% down. So 17,500 isn't realistic. Neither is 750 to 900 square foot accommodation or 2 bedrooms, because families have more than one child, and a $490,000 price tag, and that isn't realistic either.
Well, all of those is not true. $490,000. I've talked to 3 different developers right now, and all of them said that they can do a 900 square foot 2-bedroom unit for $490,000. No, it's not going to have 2 bathrooms. No, it's not going to have granite countertops. No, it's not going to have a lot of the fancy bells and whistles that we may want in a lot of our places, but it is going to be affordable, and it will be, and it can be built for that price. So, and if it can't be built here, how are they building 400? Because this number came from Langford, $490,000. That's what they're getting it for. So you got to remember one thing when you look at this is that they're getting an uplift on their density by the same number. So if a developer puts in 3 units into his building, then he gets to get 3 extra units in there. So there's an incentive for him to build that at a lower price to qualify for that program. This has been well thought out. This isn't just something that we just come up with, at the spur of the moment. And yes, it would be wonderful if the federal government, the provincial government, or the banks would do it. But how well have they been doing so far? They haven't been doing it so far. There's far too many people that can't get anywhere near owning a home. And you're right. Those are all costs that are included in the purchase of a price to begin with. Those are called closing costs. And you do have land transfer tax, you do have legal fees, and you do have mortgage insurance that you have to cover. And that's, without it, they'd have to come up with $35,000 for the place. So, that's really what it comes down to. This, if nobody takes takes advantage of it because it's not working, then we've got our answer, and what we've spent a few hours on it of staff time. But at this point in time, I can't see us turning it down. So I'm being asked to call the question, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Please note that Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Patterson are opposed. Thank you. Wow, that one was fun. Wait till we get to this one. My motion is that staff review the concept and provide input as to what will be required to amend our bylaws so any areas identified in the official community plan that is designated to allow residential uses, save and except single-family dwellings, will eliminate the maximum density restrictions for the purposes of affordable housing developments. At this time, I'd like to make this motion and ask for a seconder. Councillor Greer, thank you. Parksville is no different than any other community, not only on this island, not only in British Columbia, but right across Canada. We are in a housing crisis. A significant portion of our residents do not have access to suitable, affordable housing. In the last few weeks, I have received several letters, and yes, I have received several letters and emails from residents of Parksville, some with very sad stories about being evicted from their residence because their landlords are moving into the residence, or the landlord is selling their premises because the prices are high. Or if I received one from an individual that he just bought a business and can't find a place to live in town. This type of correspondence are becoming more commonplace. The solution to this problem is not easy, and it's not a quick fix. We have come a long way since we were elected. When we took office, the city had a rental vacancy rate of 0.5%. And according to the CMHC, they say that as of January, the vacancy rate was 1.8%. That's a great improvement, but it's not good enough to relieve the situation. We need to achieve and hold between 3.5% and 4% vacancy rate. Since 2018, we have approved and all but completed 977 rental units. This is over and above any freestanding single-family homes built around town. Our amazing staff are consistently providing the fastest approval times for both development permits and building permits in the area. I have been told by a number of out-of-town developers, in fact, the two of them that were here tonight, I've been told that the reason they came to Parksville was because they heard or experienced how efficient our staff are providing the necessary approvals on their projects. Now we have to turn our attention to the next step. And in my mind, the most important step to attract developers and nonprofit societies to build what our community so desperately needs, affordable housing. As you know, I've been involved for over 30 years in development and construction of many types of buildings across Canada. And the common denominator for all projects is what they call soft costs. One of the largest portions of soft costs is the expense to carry the land during the rezoning process. Recently, both levels of senior government have lobbed grenades at municipalities and are trying to blame us for the length of time it takes to get approvals. This motion, if passed, will assist us in speeding up the necessary approvals for affordable housing projects, thus reducing the overall price of these units. Rezoning of a property is required only if there is an alteration to either the use of the property or the density of units allowed on the property. If the approval process, the official community plan is the critical document. It is the one document that has been vetted through public hearings. It went through significant discussions. It is the foundation of how our community is being developed. There are always minor tweakings as times change, but generally it is a well thought out document that expresses the will of the people. In my mind, the OCP is the parent document and should dictate the zoning, or at least the zoning restrictions or requirements. My suggestion is rather simple for affordable housing. We use the density allocated in the official community plan. This would be for areas identified in the official community plan that are designated for transitional residential, multi-unit residential, downtown core, and mixed use. This motion is meant to be referred to staff and let staff review or come up with another process that may accomplish the same results and report back to council. I realize that some will say that staff are burdened with their existing workloads, and I am the first to stand up and shout that. But in this case, the importance of processing affordable housing applications merits a reshuffling of priorities. If you think about it, affordable housing is the foundation to every objective this council has. We have done a great job on recreation. We have done as much as we possibly can for community safety. But without housing, we are stymied on economic development, and we have an even greater difficulty in attracting doctors. By reducing the approval time for a project from acquisition of land to occupancy, we will substantially reduce the developer or nonprofit society's carrying costs. It will make Parksville more attractive to these groups, to bring their projects here. By passing this motion, it will make Parksville a leader amongst our fellow municipalities in finding ways to improve approval times. It will cause the senior levels of government to realize that municipalities can significantly reduce times to process applications for affordable housing projects. I believe that this motion goes a long way to achieving our primary goal, or attracting young families. We are moving the dial on attracting young families. Here's some numbers that I picked up in the last couple of weeks. In 2016, the number of people between the ages of 20 and 55 made up 24% of our population. As of last July, we were at 26.7. We've moved the needle with what we've done so far by 2.7%. And I believe that we've increased that even further since last July. Just to get 30% would be a major accomplishment for this council, but we cannot do that if we do not have affordable places to live. I'm asking for council support to, at the very least, have staff review this motion and report back to us. And yes, reprioritize our workload so that it can be done. Thank you. Did I get a second? Okay. Councilor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I don't disagree that this is needed. My question is directly to you in regards to when you put this motion forward. Did you get any feedback from our CAO and our Director of Planning?
No, I made this up myself. Councilor Fraz.
Thank you. Just yesterday, I was helping a young single father here fill out an application for affordable housing in Parksville. And there was one building out of all the affordable housing buildings that we have here that were available for someone who's not a senior. They're all age restricted otherwise. There's one building. We have now a Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society building up by the QF there, but there is a huge wait list. There's much of a need for it. And it is one of the things that are holding young people out of our community, is having the affordable housing and co-op housing developments available. I think being able to speed up that process, knowing that it's something that we have been approving. I mean, every step of the way that it's come through here, we've been on it. I don't see why we would do anything but try to look for how to improve along that process. So I think it's a very interesting motion, and one that I'm happy to see moving forward as well. I'd be very happy to see more affordable housing and co-op in Parksville. So anything that can help that along, because I've always seen this council as a council that's helping people into homes, and getting more of this type of housing is definitely a win.
Councilor Wilson and Councilor Chandler.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councilor
So Thank you. So, well, I have to go back to the previous motion and the staff time. Afraid it does take staff time, but I also have some concerns. I'm not sure on one hand, you've said that we should be applauded, our staff should be applauded for pushing projects through so quickly and turnaround times. At the same time, you're saying, this will make it go faster. I'm not sure I really truly understand what this motion is going to do, except add to staff time. I'm not saying that that we don't need affordable housing. The thing that concerns me is that when projects come through that are affordable, I know I've talked to staff, we move that up as a priority. So they do go through quickly. I can't quite connect as to how this is going to help that. But the other thing that concerns me in your motion is, and I'm not sure I really understand this, giving staff the ability to densify traditional zoning, transitional zoning. So whether or not I'm on the right path on this or not, I really don't understand why we need to give that over to staff and how that's really going to help. Maybe it would help, because I look at the Molliet and Despard apartments that I opposed that it was a transitional neighborhood, and council approved it for high density right against a single family. So maybe staff would have not done that. So maybe that would be better if staff had this. But at the same time, I'm not sure of the benefit to staff, how that's even going to work any faster than it already does. I'm just having a real problem with understanding why this motion or how this motion is going to help. And the other thing I'd like to ask directly to you is, would this mean that the proposal would bypass an ADP review because of the hurry to get it through? And I also feel that each application should be considered for the impact on the surrounding neighborhood. And I do feel that needs some council input. So nothing against staff. I just think I think more than anything though, this needs to be deferred to the next council. We've got 4 months to go. It seems like a bit of a rush. I don't understand it enough to make a decision that would be, I feel, informed enough. And quite frankly, tonight, I'm not going to get the information anymore from you. I need to digest this and sit and think about it, ask staff questions. So, I'd have to say I would vote to defer it right now.
Let me address your points. First off, I said development permits and building permits. They're not even in the discussion at this point in time about rezoning. That's a different process altogether. Our staff have done an amazing job on development permit processing and building permit processing. Rezoning, you touched on the rezoning side of this, Councillor Wilson, when you said, well, what about the places up on Molliet? Those places on Molliet, the OCP says that they're transitional. I can't remember what the actual OCP.
They were transitional.
And there were single family houses. So they were zoned single family, but they were on transitionally designated properties in the OCP. Whether the properties behind were single family or not is not relevant. The OCP said that they were, it was zoned for transitional. All I'm saying is you go to that particular piece of property and it says transitional zoning, then you go to the density of transitional zoning, which is 25 units per hectare or whatever that number is. I can't remember off the top of my head. That is the difference that we're talking about. Rezoning only changes two things. It changes the use or it changes the density on the property. Period. End of sentence. It's over with at that point in time. So that's what we're talking about. So I hope I made it a little bit clearer for you. I'm sorry if I'm not.
Well, I think that's something that perhaps I'll come and talk to you about, because that particular property this council allowed it to go way, way higher than transitional. So, if staff were going to keep it as transitional, that might be another story. And then it would be better than having council change our OCP and do something that it wasn't intended to be.
Okay.
That's
Councillor Chandler and Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Worship. I like the proposal. I think, are we not speaking about the Despard location where we had those 3 large apartment buildings, and that is the transitional property? No, different?
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
think that would fall.
I'm sorry, I was confused there. So anyways, in respect to the process and moving forward on something like this, I'll just give you a couple of examples. I have a lady that's worked for me for about the last 5 years. She's got a young son, unable to find any kind of housing right now. She's basically headed a application in with BC Housing for 3 years now, and tried to get into the Molliette property, has tried to get into several options, looking at potentially having to move out of the area into Nanaimo or Port Alberni or whatever would make the most sense for her. So that's just one example. She's a hardworking single mom. She's got a developmentally disabled boy, and she's kind of a prime candidate for this sort of housing that we need in this town, right? Not to say that we don't have hundreds of people in the same situation. Just the other day, got a call from somebody that was concerned, our beloved Flying Phil and Harry, who are always around town here, walking around. They're being evicted, not evicted, sorry. Their house is being sold. And so essentially they will be out of that property within 60 days of the sale or 70 days of the sale, whatever it be. At the end of the day, there's 3 people that need accommodation. So again, they, just like anybody else, we're all searching for that solution. There's hundreds of people that are needing affordable housing in general, that are finding themselves moving into RVs, just even as a stepping stone to get themselves something else. And it's becoming a super epidemic, obviously. So it's something we need to get a grip on. I believe that this would be something that will give us a bit of a hand forward on it. And hopefully, again, it won't take a lot of staff time, but I support it to move it forward and see where it goes. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you. And I guess I'm just referring to the first statement, the Parksville has a housing crisis. We have more affordable housing than many other communities of similar populations, especially on the island. Between our small lots, carriage houses, basement suites, subsidized rental, multi-suite projects, supportive and assisted living units, townhouses, mobile homes currently providing affordable housing for many residents of our community. Also, the recent influx of development proposal applications within our downtown core will provide densification to enhance our downtown, as well as providing housing, allowing a car-free lifestyle if they so choose to save some dollars. A balanced mix of housing types in our community creates a sustainable lifestyle for all residents. The thing is that as it is right now, we have lots already existing. And it wasn't just this council, it was previous councils that allowed for the basement suites and the carriage houses and the small lot subdivision. They put the zoning in place to make that happen. And it was very successful, and they were very effective of what they did. And the trouble is, they all got taken. People moved into them. Funny about that, hey? They did. They moved here because there was affordable housing, or they moved from where they were, whether they're living with their parents or their neighbor or whatever. They moved into those units. And there are those affordable units are still there, and they do turn over. Sometimes there has to be a waiting list, but the reality is that they exist in our community already. So the thing is, to say that there's a housing crisis is just really, well, there will never be enough. How could you ever have enough affordable housing? You never could, because everyone wants affordable housing. But that means everybody across Canada. We can't do that, folks. Part two is to use zoning as an issue. I heard you said, compliance with the official community plan would still be important. But zoning and so forth, that where it would be transitional and so forth, would allow for quicker approval without having to go through all the zoning amendments and all that cumbersome paperwork and all that goes through. But that cumbersome paperwork is what protects neighborhoods and so forth. People that bought in adjacent units to that bought knowing that the zoning and the properties around them were such. Now, all of a sudden they bought there, they located a park, so they love it here. And now all of a sudden we're saying, now the zoning next door to you that you thought you bought beside, well, that's not in play because we're going to override that if they put up an affordable housing project. So the thing is that now they're kind of like, well, great, that's not what I was advised when I bought this house. So it's overriding the existing people that already have homes in this area that didn't think that there would be the transitional without going through a zoning amendment process, which it is. So that's very disrespectful for our existing citizens. So the thing is that the other part is that this is called the affordable housing proposal. Already we have established that our staff, the quickest turnaround times, bar none, whether it's a zoning amendment or whether it's just a DP or building permit, they have the quickest turnaround of anybody on the island. And that's why we're so busy. And to suggest that, okay, so now if we can make that just process a little bit faster, then we're going to bring the prices of homes down. I don't get it. Where is the savings? Where is the savings going to come other than this carrying charges? Maybe if they bought the property in advance of actually getting a permit type of thing, there'd be some carrying charges, but enough to make that affordable. Where's that going to come from? How is it going to be affordable?
Councillor O'Brien, you live in Neverland when it comes to this type of thing. First off, let's talk straight up so that everybody that's listening isn't misled as usual. If you would have read the document that I provided to you, it very specifically said that we would not be talking about single-family housing areas. If it's zoned single-family housing, we're not talking about changing that. We're not talking about rezoning it. We're not talking about doing anything. It would stay as a single family. For you, with your comments about, oh, we've got lots of these places. No, we don't. Your numbers are not even close to being right. If you want to look at it, I'll be glad to send you the percentages. I think the number of freestanding homes are like 60, 65, 70%, somewhere in that range. The number of duplexes the number of rentals is very, very small in comparison to what we have in Parksville. So then you go back to with the same discussion that Councillor Wilson brought up with development permits and building permits being fast. Yes, they are fast, but the rezoning is not fast. It's governed by the rules of what you have to do, and it can take anywhere from 6 months to a year to get a rezoning on a piece of property. What we're talking about is going to a piece of property across the street, for example. You wouldn't need a rezoning on that because it's in the downtown core and there's a single family house there. You would just go to that particular spot and we would start with the development permit and the building permit. So yes, to Councillor Wilson's argument or question was we would have the ADP involved just like they always are. We were not changing any of that. We are just eliminating the density on a piece of property on zoning. So, you know, we can make up all the nonsense that we want on this. The reality is that it falls in place. We don't have enough affordable housing. And to say that, well, maybe there's a waiting list. And yes, there is a waiting list. We all know there's a waiting list on it, and we're trying to deal with it. And are we going to attract young families with the price of houses? The average price of a freestanding house in Parksville last week went to over $1 million. Yep, that's going to get us a lot of young people moving in here. So, you know, you go from there, and then you look at it and you start to figure out 47% of our population, 2 people or less live in our freestanding houses. In 42%, 1 person lives in our freestanding houses. So when you start looking at all that, the numbers are not there to justify what you're saying. So this is an important process. Yes, it takes time, but at some point in time, and we've kicked this can too far down the road. And if we don't make it now, it's never going to change. We have to start to react to the situation of affordable housing, and affordable housing has to be taken care of now, not the next term, not 2 terms from now, not when it's convenient, not when staff has enough time. Think about it. How much time does staff spend on a rezoning process that they wouldn't have to spend if they didn't do a rezoning? So that takes that argument out to some extent. We go directly to a building permit and a development, or to a development permit, then a building permit on the site. And it's just as easy as that. We go down to maybe 3 months time in total, instead of 6 months to a year, plus the development permit and the building permit after that. All of these things save money. When you're in development, you know that every day that you wait before you start construction and before you open that door and let the people come in, it is costing you interest on your money. And that is just a fact of life in the development business. And that's what they look at, is the biggest single factor in our soft costs that we're experiencing. So, you know, from that perspective, we need to be doing this. We need to be going forward. We need to look at it. It's not changing the world. Other communities have done this in the province of British Columbia. This is not something that's just come out of Ed Main's mind and said, this sounds like a really good idea. This is something that can be done. And all we're doing is we're adjusting the density to coincide with the OCP, which is the only document, by the way, that has been vetted to the public, which has gone to public hearings, which has had all of this done before we declared it. And it, you know, just to go one step further with your argument about, oh, I wouldn't know that. Yeah, you would. If you were living in a house, you would know what your OCP would be if you're living in a multifamily area or not. You might not know it in single family because it's obvious, but in other areas, like on Molliet, you know that those are multifamily multifamily lots, transitional lots. So all you're doing is you're going there and you're saying, let's make this one the developer comes to us and says, I want to make this in a 4-story, 100-unit apartment building. If you got the land, you meet all the qualifications, you meet the variances or the lack of variances, everything is there. So it just goes through a much faster process. It's all this is doing. It doesn't take a lot to figure this one out. It is a process. It is the amount of time we spend on it. The developers will be coming to us before they'll go to Nanaimo and spend 6 months waiting or a year waiting, or going to Qualicum Beach and spending 6 months or a year waiting for rezoning. They know they can get it done here, and they know that we are the best at getting building permits, and they know we are the best at getting development permits. And if we're the best at getting rezoning, just think what that would do for us. Look at how far we've gone to date on this with just development permits and building permits. So now we add rezoning onto the package, and we will be the best in the area, if not in the province, to do. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify something with you. Transitional does not mean 4-story apartments. I'm assuming that you understand that.
It has a density.
What for transitional is meant to be a gradual step up from single family to a higher density. And the apartments, the district group's apartments required an OCP amendment that took it from transitional into an RDH or whatever that is. I've kind of forgotten the terminology for it, but the transitional itself is about, that would be patio homes, duplexes, that sort of thing. That's what transitional is. So if you're thinking that a developer, that staff are going to allow a 4-story apartment on transitional, they would actually have to come back to council to get a permission. So I just want to clarify that transitional is not that high density you're talking about.
Hold on. First off, the OCP, if it required an OCP amendment, then all the bets are off, aren't they?
That's right.
We're not coinciding with if we don't coincide with the OCP, you've taken the discussion off the table. You don't have anything to rezone or to change the zoning for in that particular case. Transitional, I'll get the definition for you tomorrow.
I have the definition.
Go ahead.
I have the definition.
Hold on for a second. I'm sorry. You can't see me. I think you can. You can't see me. Go ahead, Director Russell.
If I may, Worship, my understanding from the resolution on the table is to look at both the transitional and our multi-unit residential designation. So we have 2 OCP designations that allow for consideration of higher density. As Councillor Wilson pointed out, the transitional, it tends to be 2-story buildings, sort of under 50 dwelling units per hectare. Our multi-unit residential designation is up to 150 units per hectare and allows for consideration of up to 4-story buildings. So that's hopefully the clarification that's helpful.
And my point is that we never said anywhere that we wouldn't follow what these OCP dictated. There's all kinds of variances to what the density is on all of these things. They vary. The one we were looking at today out on Grieg Road is 25 units per hectare, if I'm not mistaken. It's 1,373 units in total if they were able to do the whole piece of property. So yes, it may be a 2-story building, but it's more than a single family dwelling that we're able to put on there. I can't.
It would still be, if you don't mind if I interject here, it would still be zoned as that, Your Worship, you know. So like, I mean, the ability to build what it's supposed to be is still there.
Okay.
Anyway,
We're just going in circles.
Yeah, we're going in circles.
All right, Councillor Ryan was.
Thank you, Your Worship. Why is that whenever we talk about affordable housing, that the alarmist statement always comes out? Well, just last week, the average median house in a single family dwelling in Parksville is 1.1 million.
I said 1 million, but okay.
1.4 million, 1.5 million, it doesn't matter. Why does that figure always get banted about? Because if it's affordable housing, the people aren't going to be looking at $1.4 million homes. They're looking at starter homes. As of last week, there's a townhouse on Corfield, not far from your neighborhood, Corfield, that was under 400,000. That was purchased for 400,000. It was a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom place, actually. And sorry, I believe I'm speaking here, Councillor France. So the thing is that reality is that there are some properties that are considerably less than $1 million. So, and they're townhouses and they're manufactured homes. I shouldn't have to explain it. But the thing is that if it's a starter home, you really don't need to be starting at the $1 million level. You need to be looking at what you can afford. And if that is affording a townhouse that doesn't have granite kitchens and so forth, then maybe that's what you should be looking at. And that those are on the market. So in the case of your statement that a co-op housing, like I'm not talking about affordable rental here because they're kind of mixed here, but affordable purchase here. How does affordable purchase say that they put in a co-op housing development like townhouses or patio homes, connected homes and so forth? Where is the cost savings going to come in to make that for purchase more affordable? Even say it goes into a transitional area. where it is not maybe zoned that way. Where is the cost savings going to come? Instead of that brand new townhouse that's going to cost X amount of dollars, how is it by doing this without all the paperwork for rezoning? How is that townhouse price going to come down to an affordable level?
Well, first off, I'm not real sure how we got to buying houses when we were talking about this.
Co-ops, you said co-ops.
Co-op
and
housing is
townhouses.
not necessarily buying housing, that's renting as much as it is buying. In
They're
fact, more.
both.
Well, okay, so they're both, and we're not here to solve every problem in the world. Let's just solve some of the problems here in this world. Let's just talk about this directly affects affordable housing rentals more than anything. Pardon me? You're asking for the question to be called? Fair enough. I will call the question. It's been asked. All those in favor? And opposed? Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Patterson. Thank you. Do we have any new notices of motion from the members? New business? Any new business? Moving right along. Next meeting will be June the 6th at 6 p.m. And now I need a mover and a seconder to proceed to a closed meeting pursuant to 91(1) of the community charter. In favor, Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Fraz, all those in favor? Good.